Chapter 386. Sang Hetong never thought that Lung Shiqi's cultivation would soar, and he even dared to attack him. In Sang Hetong's view, Lung Shiqi's strike was comparable to a Gang Spirit Realm Master's strike. It was indeed amazing. Such a strike was nothing to Sang Hetong in the past, but now he was under Tu Deng's control, and had no room to fight back. This was dangerous. Even though he was in the unity of heaven and men realm, he had not specially tempered his body. If he was hit by this strike, he would definitely die. The blood veins on Sang Hetong's body suddenly increased, and he looked like a man of blood. His body split open, and dozens of goo worms of different colors and shapes rushed out. Originally, with Sang Hetong's goo arts, he could control goo worms with a thought. He could also use goo worms to perform all sorts of strange methods. But now he could only release these goo worms to help him block the saber beam. The moment the goo worms appeared, Lung Shiqi's blade light also arrived. With an extremely soft sound, all of the goo worms were cut into two halves. Fortunately, these goo worms were carefully cultivated by Sang Hetong, and they helped him block the blade. But his heart was bleeding. These goo worms were not meant to be used like this. However, at this moment, a sharp aura quietly invaded his mind, causing his mental strength to fluctuate. The power was not strong, and it did not hurt his mind, but it shook his mind. Seeing this, Tu Deng's eyes were suddenly filled with splendor. He clearly felt that Lung Shiqi's strike had the feeling of void destruction divine blade. The reason why Lung Shiqi stopped absorbing the power of the blood cocoon and turned to attack Sang Hetong was that he found that although his cultivation was soaring, the spiritual strength in his body was very heterogeneous. Even his fifth level of spirit aperture realm was a little unstable. He knew that one reason was that his cultivation had soared too fast, and the other reason was that the power in the blood cocoon was not pure enough, which led to his unstable foundation. Lung Shiqi made a prompt decision. He no longer coveted a temporary cultivation base, and stopped absorbing the blood cocoon's power. But then again, even though he didn't want to absorb it, the energy still kept drilling into his body. Therefore, he had to find a way to release this power. With his current cultivation level, it was enough for him to break free from Sang Hetong's restraints. Thus, he unsheathed his azure rain saber and slashed out with fleeting flash. However, this time was very different from the past. First of all, the power this saber absorbed was not his own power, but the power within the blood cocoon. That was why he didn't use much spirit force. In addition, the moment he swung his blade, he also used the void/divine blade. Unfortunately, he only used a trace of the rhythm of the void/slashing godly blade. However, this accidental combination also allowed Lung Shiqi to see the possibility of the combination of the ephemeral flower and the void-slaying godly blade. If one day in the future he really managed to fuse the ephemeral flash of the night and the void-slaying godly saber, he would truly be able to slash apart both his physical body and primordial spirit. Visible saber light could be dodged or blocked, but an invisible saber that specialized in slashing the primordial spirit was impossible to defend against. Just like the current Sang Hetong, he was caught off guard. In the instant he was distracted, Lung Shiqi waved his hand and hundreds of golden thread goo crawled towards Sang Hetong. Sang Hetong came back to his senses and found that the golden thread goo had already arrived in front of him. His body shook and he started to struggle, trying to break free from Tu Deng's control. A trace of blood suddenly flowed out from the corner of Tu Deng's mouth, but he still firmly restrained Sang Hetong. He knew that the most critical moment had arrived. Hundreds of golden thread goo crawled onto Sang Hetong's body and broke through his skin, drilling into his body. Sang Hetong immediately screamed. His body was filled with dense spirit energy. However, the golden thread goo fed on the spirit energy of myriad spirit goo devouring technique. Not only were they unharmed, they even grew stronger. Normally, Sang Hetong had many ways to kill these golden silk goo, but unfortunately, he was powerless now and could only watch as the golden silk goo devoured his spirit energy. Soon, Sang Hetong's spirit energy aura began to drop rapidly. He had absorbed everyone's chi and blood and reached the limit of unity of heaven realm. But now he had fallen to the late stage of unity of heaven realm, and was still falling. Late stage, middle stage, early stage. It didn't stop until Sang Hetong's cultivation fell to the late stage of spirit astral realm, because all the golden thread goo were saturated and could no longer devour his spirit energy. During this process, Lung Shiqi held the Qinglin saber in his hand. All of his spiritual energy, mental energy, qi and blood force, as well as his firm will, including the power of the blood cocoons, were mobilized and compressed to the extreme. The Qinglin saber began to tremble and let out a buzzing sound. Just as the golden thread goo stopped, Lung Shiqi slashed out with the strongest saber he had ever used. At this moment, the entire space seemed to be frozen. A ray of saber light flashed, as if it was going to cut the world in half. Lung Shiqi, who was at the 5th level of Spirit Aperture Realm, condensed all of his strength for a brief moment, and its power was indescribable. Of course, Lung Shiqi didn't have the strength to cut through space, but it was no problem for him to cut a person in half. That person was Sang Hetong. Faced with Lung Shiqi's saber light, which was even stronger than before, he couldn't help but show a horrified expression. Even now, he still had this expression on his face, but his expression had already frozen, because his body had been completely cut in half from the middle. Strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out from his body. Instead, there was a stinky and disgusting mucus. Those were the goo worms that he had been raising in his body. With the death of his body, those goo worms also died. At this moment, this person who had toyed with everyone in the palm of his hand was finally filled with hatred. Ding! Lung Shiqi suddenly knelt down and used the Qinglin saber to support his body. His final move, a brief moment, seemed to have used up all of his strength. However, immediately after, cracks appeared on the Qinglin saber's body, and it finally shattered with a loud bang. Even a 4th-level spirit tool couldn't withstand the terrifying power of a brief moment. At this moment, in Lung Shiqi's eyes, a green shadow floated above Sang Hetong's body. With a thought, the green shadow entered his body. Immediately, he felt a strange power cleansing his body and increasing his mental strength. This was the power of Sang Hetong's remnant soul. A remnant soul of the unity of Heaven Realm. This power allowed Lung Shiqi to recover quite a bit. He stood up and walked forward, directly taking off Sang Hetong's mustard seed bracelet. No one objected to this action, because they were still in shock. Chapter 387. Everyone was shocked beyond words when they saw Sang Hetong die. At first, Lung Shiqi stood out, but they didn't have much hope for Lung Shiqi, because Lung Shiqi's cultivation wasn't enough. Although the late stage of Spirit Pulse realm wasn't weak, it was nothing to Sang Hetong, who was in the realm of one with the world. Later, Sang Hetong used the power of blood to pour into Lung Shiqi, wanting to make him explode. Everyone thought that Lung Shiqi was about to die. However, Lung Shiqi continued to absorb the power, and his cultivation soared. He even broke through to the Spirit Aperture realm. This brought a glimmer of hope to the crowd. However, he was still able to control the formation even when his body was under control. In an instant, thousands of people exploded. The rich power of qi and blood formed a blood cocoon around Lung Shiqi. Seeing that Lung Shiqi was about to die, he didn't die. Instead, his cultivation broke through, and he even broke through to the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Since when was it so easy to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm? One had to know that the most difficult part of the Spirit Aperture Realm wasn't cultivating spirit energy, but opening the spirit apertures. They had never heard of anyone who could open dozens of spirit apertures in a few breaths of time. Everything that happened had completely broken everyone's understanding. How could they not be shocked? What surprised them even more was Lung Shiqi's saber, especially the saber that killed Sang Hetong at the end. That saber caused even the spirit astral realm experts to feel a chill run down their spines. Under the saber, the space was almost frozen. Who could block such a saber technique? Even Sang Hetong couldn't block it and died under the saber. A person in the Spirit Aperture Realm had crossed 2 realms and killed Sang Hetong, who was in the realm of one with the world. No one would believe such a thing. Even if it happened right in front of their eyes, they still found it hard to accept. In fact, the biggest contributor to Sang and Tong's death was Tuding. Tuding restricted 90% of Sang Hetong's strength. In addition, Lung Shiqi made Sang Hetong's cultivation fall to Gang's spirit realm with the help of golden thread venomous insect. Therefore, Sang Hetong was killed when Sang Hetong had no ability to resist. Otherwise, Lung Shiqi would not be able to deal with Sang Hitong's strange gu arts. No matter how amazing Lung Shiqi's slash was, Sang Hitong would be able to easily break it. After Sang and Tong died, the blood sacrifice formation collapsed on its own without anyone controlling it. Everyone was finally able to move freely again. The blood prison that trapped Yu Ruifeng and Prince Gus had also disappeared. The two of them were now skin and bones, and their auras were very weak. It was obvious that they had lost a lot of blood and qi. As for his cultivation, he had fallen to the middle or late stage of Gang Spirit Realm. When they came to Lung Shiqi, they all looked at him with gratitude. However, when Prince Gus looked at Tuding, he showed a thoughtful expression. Tuding did not pay attention to them. He was still sitting cross-legged, murmuring to Sang Hitong's body, as if he was reciting some scriptures. At this time, the remaining 2,000 or 3,000 Imperial guards and masters all gathered around and asked about Prince Gus's well-being. Prince Heli was dead, so it was conceivable that Prince Gus would be their leader in the future. More importantly, Sang Hitong was also dead, and even Princess Bess was killed in the chaos. It seemed that Prince Gus was the best candidate for the throne. As for Chu Li, the Minister of State Affairs, they did not take him seriously. No matter how great Chu Li's prestige was in the imperial court, he did not have any military power, and his strength was negligible. He was not qualified to compete with Prince Gus for the throne. In this way, Prince Gus could be regarded as the next king, so these people naturally cared more about him. Prince Gus chatted with these people for a while, and let them go to plunder the resources of the Gu God sect. Tuding, the former sect leader, did not have the slightest reaction. Prince Gus walked to Lung Shiqi and Yu Ruifeng, clasped his fist and said, "Lord Yu, Lord Lu, it is thanks to you two that we can get rid of Sang Hitong and the Gu God sect. Otherwise, we'll all die here." Lung Shiqi did not expect that he could be called Lord Lu by Prince Gus, so he immediately said a few polite words. As for Yu Ruifeng, after taking a deep look at Lung Shiqi, he began to look around. At this moment, 90% of the people had gone to plunder the resources in groups. Only a few spirit cultivators of the 4 realms of Sky Human were protecting Prince Gus. And there were only 4 Dark Thunder Guards left. Among them was Guan Feihong. Lung Shiqi had noticed that something was wrong long ago. He had called Guan Feihong to the edge of the formation, so he was not affected. However, the other Dark Thunder Guards had suffered heavy losses. Even Yuan Song, the great supervisor of the South region, had died. Yu Ruifeng's expression was gloomy to the extreme. The Dark Thunder Guards had only come to Zhulu country to go through the motions, but the king had suddenly died, and they were also swept into this huge vortex. In the end, they fell into Sang Hitong's trap, causing them to lose more than half of their manpower. These people were all carefully nurtured by Yu Ruifeng. How could he not feel heartache? But then again, if it were not for Lung Shiqi and Tuding turning the tide, everyone here would have died. In the end, they all became stepping stones for Sang Hitong to break through to the Sky Yuan realm. It was already good enough to be able to survive. Yu Ruifeng glanced at Lung Shiqi and Tuding. He did not know how Lung Shiqi met the previous sect leader of the Gu God sect, nor did he know why Lung Shiqi had such a strange gu like the golden silk gu. He also did not know what Lung Shiqi had experienced when he left the King City. But the result was that Lung Shiqi had saved him. Because of this, Yu Ruifeng would not ask Lung Shiqi. He said to Lung Shiqi, "Back then, your master saved me once. Today you saved me again. I don't know when I will be able to repay the kindness of both of you." Lung Shiqi immediately replied, "Martial uncle, what are you talking about? There is no need to mention repayment between us." "Ha, good. I, Yu Ruifeng, will recognize you as my nephew." Yu Ruifeng patted Lung Shiqi's shoulder and laughed. Prince Gus looked at Yu Ruifeng. He also found that there were only 6 Dark Thunder Guards left, including Yu Ruifeng and Lung Shiqi. How should he explain this to the Dark Thunder Guards? How should he explain to the Thunder Flame dynasty? Unknowingly, Prince Gus had put himself in the shoes of a king. Prince Gus walked over with a solemn expression. Yu Ruifeng knew what he was thinking with a glance. "Prince Gus, I can report this matter to the Thunder Flame dynasty. However, I want 50% of the Gu God sect's cultivation resources. and I want priority in choosing them." Upon hearing this, Prince Gus felt relieved. If Yu Ruifeng had reported the truth, then all the blame would have been pushed onto the dead Sang Hetong. However, he soon felt a wave of heartache. Yu Ruifeng wanted 50% of the Gu God sect's cultivation resources. This was an exorbitant demand. The Gu God sect was not only a first-rate faction, but also the national religion of the Zhulu country, who knew how much wealth they had accumulated over the years. However, Prince Gus agreed without any hesitation. As long as he could spend money, he was naturally willing. Chapter 388. Lung Shiqi could understand Yu Ruifeng's need for resources. Because Sang Hetong had drained a large amount of qi, blood and spirit energy, Yu Ruifeng's qi and blood loss was very serious, and his spirit energy cultivation had also dropped by a large realm. Therefore, he naturally needed a large amount of resources to recover his cultivation as soon as possible. After receiving an answer from Yu Ruifeng, Prince Gus brought people to inspect the resources, so as to prevent people from filling their pockets. Yu Ruifeng began to adjust his breathing under the protection of several dark lightning guards. At this time, Tu Deng sighed slightly. Lung Shiqi stepped forward and bowed. "Many thanks to Senior for saving my life." Tu Deng didn't care about this matter. He sighed. This old man seems to have seen his past self in Sang Hetong, and also seems to have seen another version of himself. At that time, if Sang Hetong hadn't imprisoned this old man, perhaps one day this old man would have done such an intolerable thing. Power is really too tempting. Sang Hetong was completely addicted to the pursuit of power, and even this old man almost fell for it. Little friend Lu was able to take the initiative to stop absorbing the power of the blood cocoon to increase his cultivation. This old man admires you for having such a strong will. Lung Shiqi modestly said, "Senior is too kind. This old man isn't overpraising you. Little friend Lu has the potential to become a supreme expert. If he doesn't die young, he will definitely become a powerful expert in the future. Now that this matter is over, the Gu God sect that this old man created has been completely destroyed. This old man's heart can be considered to have no more worries. From now on, this old man will save the dying and heal the injured with this ruined body of mine. This can more or less make up for the sins this old man committed in the past." After saying this, Tu Deng turned around to leave. "Senior, wait." Lung Shiqi stopped him and quickly stepped forward to take out a mustard seed bag. "This is?" Lung Shiqi said with a smile. "Senior will know when you see it." Tu Deng's spirit entered the mustard seed bag. Then, even though he had experienced a lot and his will was as firm as a mountain, at this time, he revealed an expression of shock, joy, and eagerness. The mustard seed bag contained the other 8 sets of scriptures. There were hundreds of scriptures. "Little friend Lu, what are you doing?" Lung Shiqi said seriously. "Senior, to be honest, I came across these books by accident. They don't seem to be products of the Falling Star continent." Junior is slow-witted because he was unable to comprehend the profoundness within. As the saying goes, treasured swords are given to heroes. "I will give these to Senior." Tuding, to be precise, it should be Tuding's kindness, was the only person Lung Shiqi had seen since he came to this world who was suitable for these sutras. Rather than leaving it here to collect dust, he might as well gift it to Tu Deng. This was his sincere offer. Of course, it would be best if he could do her a favor. Tuding viewed these scriptures as treasures, but he still shook his head and said, "I can't take your things for free. It's a pity that I don't have anything valuable on me. How about this? I can promise you 3 things." As he spoke, he took out 3 emerald green jade beads and said, "This old man will still be in Zhulu country in the next few years. Little friend, if you come with this token, this old man can do 3 things for little friend, as long as you don't go against this old man's wishes." Lung Shiqi's heart shook and he was pleasantly surprised. He originally thought that it would be fine as long as he could do a favor, but he didn't expect Tuding to be so generous. This was equivalent to him being able to use a Unity of Heaven expert 3 times. This gave Lung Shiqi a lot more confidence. Lung Shiqi also knew that since Tuding said this, he wouldn't take it back. He didn't stand on ceremony and directly took the 3 jade beads and carefully put them away. Seeing this, Tuding revealed a smile. Leng Shiqi suddenly thought of something and immediately asked, "Senior, what is the origin of this formation that Sang Hetong used?" To be honest, this junior has seen a similar formation in a secret realm before. Tuding heard this and immediately frowned. This old man actually doesn't know much about this formation. This formation is an ancient book that this old man obtained by chance when he was young and traveling. I have never paid too much attention to it. A few decades ago, Sang Hetong suddenly discovered this thing and was very obsessed with it. This old man was afraid that he would go astray, so I destroyed the ancient book that recorded the formation. I didn't think that Sang Hetong would be able to deduce the complete formation from a few words. AI, if he put all his effort into comprehending the power of heaven and earth, he might be able to rely on his own strength to break through to the heaven origin realm. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi nodded. 10,000 years ago, Meng Tianzong had also killed over 10,000 disciples of the Divine Illusion Palace in order to break through. Meng Tianzong and Sang Hetong's methods were almost the same, so Leng Shiqi thought that there was some connection between the two. It seemed that everything was just a coincidence. So that's how it is. Little friend, if there is nothing else, this old man will take his leave. Farewell, senior. Tuding said and left. He didn't even look at the Gu God Peak from start to finish. Leng Shiqi looked around and saw that there was nothing else for him to do. Thus, he walked to Yu Ruifeng's side and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. Now that too many accidents had occurred in the process of his breakthrough, he needed to sort them out properly. First, he was more concerned about the strange realm between the Spirit Pulse realm and the Spirit Aperture realm. He called it the Spirit Pulse realm level 10. When he was at the Spirit Pulse realm level 10, a door appeared in his Spirit Sea. That door helped him absorb a huge amount of blood qi. Otherwise, he would have exploded before he could break through to the Spirit Aperture realm. But what was that door? Leng Shiqi didn't know. He had never heard of such a situation in the many cultivation methods he cultivated. He could only look through ancient books to find out. If he couldn't, he could ask Wu Xiang. Other than that, what Leng Shiqi was more concerned about were the strange memories that suddenly appeared in his mind. The fall of gods and devils, the collapse of heaven and earth, mountains of corpses and seas of bones. And the last thing that appeared was the Dark Shadow Clan. Although Leng Shiqi didn't see the changes in himself at that time, he could feel a cold mark on his forehead. That mark also helped him absorb a lot of blood qi. Therefore, the Dark Shadow Clan became a target for him to investigate in the future. However, whether it was that door or the mysterious Dark Shadow Clan, they were far less important than another thing, and that was the system. After Leng Shiqi erased the system's consciousness, he didn't have time to check the system's changes. He immediately opened the system. The interface didn't change much. First was his personal information, name, Leng Shiqi Lu Xingji cultivation, Spirit Aperture Realm Level 5 status, insufficient spiritual power bloodline, Dark Shadow Clan Unknown Management Authority, 37% cultivation method, Cold Underworld Treasure Golden Mystic Yang Art 5 God Flowing Light Art 1000 Turns Fantasy World Art 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique Spiritual Skills, Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Golden Mountain Breaking Seal Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Bright Sun, Mystic Yang Palm Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Cold Underworld Palm Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Cold Underworld Palm Secret Technique Void Slashing God Destroying Blade System Coins. 1382 The biggest changes in his information were his bloodline and management authority. The bloodline showed that he had the bloodline of the Dark Shadow Clan. Moreover, he had another unknown bloodline. However, other than that strange scene, Leng Shiqi's body didn't change at all. Then what was the use of this bloodline? He frowned and thought for a while, but couldn't figure it out. He simply stopped thinking about it and focused on the management authority, especially when there was a 37% after these 4 words. Does this mean that I have 37% of the management authority in the system? But how do I use this authority? Then he opened the system inventory. Everything was normal. He then opened the map system. The 4 words that entered his eyes made his whole body tremble. Map fully opened. 10,000 system coins will be used. Fully opened. Leng Shiqi stared at these words, afraid that his eyes were playing tricks on him. The system map was a very useful thing. Not only could he observe the terrain, but he could also use the fate skill to teleport. However, the system map had a huge flaw. That was that Leng Shiqi had to open the map himself. If he could open the map fully, this flaw would be completely solved. Leng Shiqi felt that the 10,000 system coins would be worth it. Unfortunately, he didn't have that many system coins right now. This matter would have to be delayed for a while. Then he opened the system store. There were still only 4 items in the system store. However, a refresh button appeared at the bottom right corner. He looked at the description and learned that he had 3 chances to refresh the system store every day. The biggest drawback of the system store was that it was too random. Now that he had 3 more chances to refresh, it was quite good. Finally, when Leng Shiqi was about to exit the system store, a line of words popped up on the interface. The system is about to be upgraded. It will take 30 natural days. The system will not be able to be used during the upgrade. Upgrade. Leng Shiqi was no stranger to this message. Every time he broke through a realm, the system would be upgraded. He was already used to it. He first transferred the things he used frequently to the mustard seed bracelet and chose yes. However, to his surprise, another message appeared. Administrator, Host 01 has requested to upgrade the system. Do you agree? Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the line of words. After a while he said, yes. System upgrade commencing. Progress 0.001%. Chapter 389. Leng Shiqi felt like he was cheating when he saw the changes in the system map and the system store. But the last request of the system made him feel that he had the authority of a manager. At the same time, he was looking forward to the upgrade of the system. Now that he had a lot of administrative authority, he would be able to use more authority after the upgrade of the system. In the end, Leng Shiqi began to study the 5-God flowing light formula. After he reached the spirit aperture realm, the second level of the 5-God flowing light formula appeared, which was enough for him to reach the gang spirit realm. Besides, there were 2 new spiritual techniques. They were the 5-God intimidating spell and the light rotation formation, both of which were at the 5th level. The 5-God intimidating spell was the upgraded version of the intimidating spell he had practiced before. It used the body of a god to enter the enemy's consciousness and intimidate the enemy's mind. Every time the 5-God intimidating spell was upgraded, 1 more god's shadow would appear. When the spell was completed, it could produce 5 god's shadows. The light rotation formation was an offensive spiritual technique, which could be summoned behind the user to activate the light rotation formation, which was very powerful. Leng Shiqi didn't choose to upgrade the 2 spiritual techniques with unlimited skill points. Instead, he decided to practice them with his own strength. First of all, when he was fighting with the system's consciousness, Leng Shiqi knew that he didn't have enough means. In particular, the system's words before it died made him feel a little uneasy. The system's consciousness might appear again in the future, so he had to be careful. Second of all, Leng Shiqi was born with a great talent for the 5-God flowing light formula. When he was in the Phantom Spirit secret realm, it only took him 2 hours to reach the 1st level. Therefore, Leng Shiqi decided to practice the 2 spiritual techniques by himself. Now that he had some time, he began to understand the mnemonics. In the afternoon, Prince Gus came. Lord Yu, the resources of the Gu God sect have been sorted out. Yu Ruifeng stood up and took Leng Shiqi and the rest of the Dark Thunder Guards to the Gu God Temple of the Gu God sect. At this time, all the resources of the Gu God sect were piled up in different categories. Looking around, it actually filled up half of the hall. The Gu God sect was a first-rate power, and it was also the national religion of Zhulu country. Not only did it have a lot of resources, but they were also very precious. Leng Shiqi secretly swallowed his saliva. Prince Gus said, Lord Yu, according to our previous agreement, you can take a limited 50% of the resources here. Losing half of the resources really made Prince Gus heartache, but compared to the throne, compared to the stability of Zhulu country, it was nothing. However, Yu Ruifeng turned to Leng Shiqi and said, Nephew, you can have 10% of my 50%. You can choose first. Both Leng Shiqi and Prince Gus were stunned when they heard this. Prince Gus didn't expect Yu Ruifeng to be so generous. However, since Leng Shiqi had saved their lives, he didn't feel ashamed to receive 10% of the resources. Leng Shiqi was also a little surprised because he had already taken Sang Hetong's mustard seed bracelet. The collection of the leader of the Gu God sect was priceless. He was also very satisfied. Of course, he would definitely take the resources that were sent to his door. The reason why Yu Ruifeng did this was nothing more than to get closer to him. Today, Leng Shiqi saved him and showed his incomparable terrifying talent. He was also favored by Eunuch Gao, one of the Dark Thunder Guards. His future was limitless. It was obviously a wise choice to give him benefits and investment when his cultivation was not high and his reputation was not well known. Therefore, Leng Shiqi politely said a few words and began to choose. First of all, what he needed most was a suitable spiritual sword. Because the Green Rain sword could not withstand the power of the short-lived flash in the pan, he urgently needed a 5th level, or even better spiritual sword. Leng Shiqi went straight to the area where the spiritual weapons were piled. He looked around and found that the highest level of spiritual weapon was only 6th level. 6th level spiritual weapons were unattainable for ordinary spirit cultivators. Generally, only the masters of the Gang spirit realm were qualified to have them. But for a first-class sect like the Gu God sect, it was a bit shabby. Leng Shiqi thought about it. The Gu God sect focused on the cultivation of the Gu God sect, and their disciples rarely used spiritual weapons, so he was relieved. He kept looking around and soon fixed his eyes on a spiritual sword. The sword was pitch black, about the same length as the Green Rain sword, but the blade was wider. There were small sawteeth on the back of the sword, which looked very ferocious. The whole sword gave people a feeling of fierceness. Most importantly, even if the sword was not moved, it would faintly emit a faint demonic chi. Obviously, it was a demonic sword. 6th level demonic sword, Demon Arrival Battle Sword. Leng Shiqi was immediately attracted by the Demon Arrival Battle Sword. He reached out to hold the sword, and the Demon Arrival Battle Sword trembled violently, as if it wanted to break free from his hand. Leng Shiqi was surprised and happy. The sword seemed to have a trace of spirituality. As far as he knew, among the spiritual weapons, those below the 7th level were called spiritual weapons, and those below the 7th level were called treasured weapons. Because the 7th level treasured weapons had a certain degree of spirituality, they could be more compatible with the user's cultivation method and spiritual skills, and their power would be multiplied. The Demon Arrival Battle Sword was at the 6th level, but it had a trace of spirituality, which meant that it was very close to the 7th level. Leng Shiqi snorted softly, and the vigorous spiritual power in his body operated, instantly making the Demon Arrival Battle Sword behave. Then he did not put the sword into the mustard seed bracelet, but carried it on his back, nourishing it with his aura. With the addition of the 6th level demonic sword, not only did it replace the Azure Rain sword, but it also increased Leng Shiqi's strength by another level. He patted the Demon Arrival Battle Sword with satisfaction, and continued to choose from the pile of spiritual weapons. After all, spiritual weapons were the most direct things to increase one's battle strength. Next, he chose the level 5 spirit tools, the Sharp Peak Spear and the Profound Ice Bow. In this way, his most commonly used weapons were greatly strengthened. After choosing the spiritual weapons, Leng Shiqi's next target was materials. In the past, Leng Shiqi did not like to collect materials, and almost all of them were sold to the system. But now that he was in the Spirit Aperture realm, it was different. The most important resource in the Spirit Aperture realm was the Awakening Pill. Although Leng Shiqi had already opened 81 spiritual apertures, this was not his limit, so he needed a large amount of Awakening Pills. And in the illusory spirit realm, he had obtained the recipe for the Awakening Pill, so now he needed to collect a large amount of materials to refine the Awakening Pill. After a while, Leng Shiqi filled 2 mustard seed bags with materials. He estimated that his 10% should be enough, so he prepared to stop. But at this time, he took a fancy to another item. Chapter 390. That thing was called the Scarlet Blood Jade. It was a heavenly treasure that was used to strengthen the body. It was rank 6. After Leng Shiqi absorbed a large amount of blood essence and Sang Hetong's soul, His body was stuck between the late stage of the spirit transformation realm and the spirit vein realm. If he were to slowly refine it, it would take a long time, so he coveted the scarlet blood jade. Lung Shiqi silently took the scarlet blood jade, and Yu Ruifeng didn't say anything. At this point, there was nothing else he wanted. There were no cultivation methods or spirit techniques here, because all of the Gu God Sect's cultivation methods were stored in another pavilion. Unfortunately, the pavilion suddenly collapsed after Sang Hitong's death. It seemed that Sang Hitong had done something to the inside. However, Lung Shiqi didn't lack cultivation methods or spirit techniques. Not to mention, the most profound cultivation method of the Gu God Sect, the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art, was on him. It was even more complete than the one Sang Hetong had. Next, it was Yu Ruifeng's turn to choose his 40%. What Yu Ruifeng chose were basically all elixirs that were used to replenish his qi, blood, and spiritual energy. After he finished choosing, the group packed up and left the Gu God Peak to return to the King's City. Lung Shiqi suddenly thought of someone who had never shown up before. It was Princess Carol. Lung Shiqi remembered that after he lured out the experts of the Gu God Sect, Princess Carol had never appeared. Logically speaking, she was an expert at the spirit aperture realm, and her battle prowess was not weak. However, she had never shown her face from beginning to end. He didn't know where Princess Carol had run off to, but now that the situation was set, she couldn't do anything by herself. When everyone reached the mountainside, Lung Shiqi suddenly stopped in his tracks, as if he had thought of something. He said to Yu Ruifeng, "Lord Yu, I remember that there are a few Gu worm caves nearby. I want to take some back to study." Yu Ruifeng agreed without hesitation. "It's okay. Go ahead." "Thank you, Lord," Lung Shiqi said and left the group, rushing towards the Gu worm cave. When Lung Shiqi was at the spirit vein realm, he could only raise 1,000 Gu worms, and most of them were golden silk Gu. The golden silk Gu was used to counter the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art. But now there were only 3 people who cultivated the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art. They were himself, Tu Dang, and Princess Carol. Thus, the golden silk Gu's effect was greatly reduced. In addition, Lung Shiqi reached the 5th layer of the spirit aperture realm, and could raise 2,000 Gu worms. Thus, he came here to replenish his Gu worms. Fortunately, the Imperial Guards did not destroy these Gu worm caves. Because these caves contained countless Gu worms, it was quite troublesome to begin with. Moreover, if no one nurtured and raised them, these Gu worms would die in a short period of time. Thus, the Imperial Guards did not pay attention to the Gu worm cave. Lung Shiqi immediately activated the myriad Gu spirit devouring technique and entered one of the Gu worm caves. He habitually activated his supercilious eyes to prevent anyone from coming over. But he immediately sensed Princess Carol's aura not far from him. At this moment, Lung Shiqi finally understood. It turned out that Princess Carol had been hiding in this Gu worm cave. These countless Gu worms had completely isolated her aura. No wonder no one had discovered her. However, regardless of whether she was here to collect Gu worms or to avoid disaster, Lung Shiqi still had a debt to settle with her. Princess Kaluo was currently in another Gu worm cave. She was concentrating on forming hand seals. In front of her, numerous Gu worms were devouring each other. But right at this moment, a familiar voice resounded. "Princess Carol, you have truly harmed me." Hearing this voice, Princess Carol's body trembled. She almost lost control of the seals in her hands. This voice came from Lung Shiqi, who was disguised as Qiuyu. To Princess Carol, the appearance of this voice was completely out of her expectations. In fact, when she saw Lung Shiqi enter Gu God Peak, she sneaked into Gu God Peak from another direction. Later, Lung Shiqi really lured all the experts of the 4 realms of human and heaven, and Princess Carol secretly came to the Gu Cave. She did not forget her original purpose, which was to find a way to detoxify the princess. Not long after she entered the Gu Cave, she sensed that the Gu God Sect had activated the sect protecting formation. She knew that the princess, the main combat faction, and the Dark Thunder Guards had definitely come to fight. But Princess Carol did not come out because she also felt that their side would definitely win. But later, There were waves of spirit energy fluctuations that made her heart palpitate from the peak, making her feel uneasy. Unfortunately, even if she went out, she could not change the situation of the battle. It was better to continue refining goo here and detoxify the princess. At this moment, Leng Shiqi suddenly appeared here. He clearly did not come in, but he could call out her name. This made her feel incredulous. But what was even more incredulous was that Leng Shiqi actually walked into the goo cave. He walked to Princess Carol's side. Princess Carol looked at Leng Shiqi in shock. Not just anyone could enter the goo worm cave. One had to have a high level of goo techniques to enter. Otherwise, one would definitely be eaten to death by 50 goo worms. But when she saw that Leng Shiqi's body was surging with green light that was of the same origin as hers, she was even more shocked. She exclaimed, 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. How can you know the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique? Leng Shiqi said coldly, Princess Carol, you're really forgetful. Could it be that you've forgotten that you've spread this cultivation technique in Mystichi City? Also, shouldn't I be the one asking the questions? Princess Carol's expression froze. She recalled that she had indeed passed on the first 2 levels of the myriad goo spirit devouring technique back then. They were all from the same organization, so it made sense that this Suoqiuyu would obtain the cultivation technique. However, the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique was not an ordinary technique. This kind of goo technique was very difficult to cultivate without guidance. But now, not only did he cultivate it, but he could also use it freely. This alone was shocking enough. What made her even more puzzled and surprised was that Suoqiuyu cultivated an extremely vicious technique with heavy yin energy. But now he could actually use the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique? He could actually cultivate 2 techniques at the same time. Leng Shiqi ignored Princess Carol's shocked expression and said, Your Highness, you said before that if I helped you lure away the experts of the Goo God sect, you would give me the mind-controlling goo. But you suddenly disappeared. It really took me a while to find you. Chapter 391. Leng Shiqi didn't give Princess Carol any face. He said sternly, Princess Carol, I will ask you one question. I risked my life to help you lure out the experts of the Goo God sect, and fulfilled my promise. Will you give me the mind-controlling insect or not? Speaking of this, the spirit energy in his body circulated rapidly, emitting the aura of the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. Moreover, it contained traces of killing intent. Princess Carol's expression suddenly changed. 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. You were hiding your cultivation before. Humph, this is my true strength, so Princess Carol, don't think you can get away by luck. With your cultivation at the 2nd level of the spirit aperture realm, you can't escape from me. Of course, if you hand over the mind-controlling insect, I can let bygones be bygones. Leng Shiqi followed Princess Carol's words and said coldly. Princess Carol's face became pale. To tell you the truth, I don't have the mind-controlling insect on me. Are you playing with me? Leng Shiqi's eyes released a ferocious killing intent. Don't worry, Your Excellency. Right now, we have something 100 times more precious than the mind-controlling insect in front of us. Leng Shiqi couldn't help but be a little surprised. Oh? What is it? The Goo King. Princess Carol opened her mouth and said these 2 words. Leng Shiqi looked at the goo worms that were still fighting and devouring each other. They were very similar to the people on the Blood Mist Island. Princess Carol explained. If I'm not wrong, the Goo God sect should have been destroyed by the 2 princes and my mother. These goo worms in the cave naturally became ownerless. I once comprehended the secret method of an ancient secret scroll by chance and learned the method to cultivate the Goo King. If everything goes well, we can use these goo worms in the cave to cultivate an unprecedented Goo King. At that time, I only need to use it to detoxify my mother, and then the Goo King will belong to Your Excellency. Leng Shiqi was very interested when he heard about the Goo King. These goo worms would self-destruct after a while, so using them to cultivate the Goo King could be considered making the best use of them. However, from Princess Carol's words, it seemed that she didn't know the truth of what happened at the summit, nor did she know that Bess was actually dead. But Leng Shiqi didn't expose her. He asked, How can I trust your highness? I dare not flatter your highness's credibility. Princess Carol solemnly said. I won't joke around with my mother's life. Besides, my life is in your hands, so what are you worried about? Lung Shiqi shook his head. No matter what Princess Carol says, I won't believe you unless you let me plant a goo worm in your body. Planting goo? Princess Carol snickered inwardly. She had the 10,000 goo spirit devouring art, so how could she be afraid of goo worms? But when Lung Shiqi took out a few golden thread goo, Princess Ka Luo's expression showed some panic. Why do you have the golden silk goo? No, you have also cultivated the 10,000 goo devouring spirit technique, so how can you control the golden silk goo? Lung Shiqi frowned. Your Highness has too many questions. If you want me to believe you, plant the golden silk goo. If your Highness goes back on her words, half of your cultivation will be crippled. Then how can I trust you to take out the golden silk goo? Humph. Lung Shiqi coldly snorted. It seems that your Highness hasn't realized the current situation. You only have two choices. Plant the golden silk goo and give the goo king to me. I will naturally remove the golden silk goo for you. Or die. Princess Carol's body trembled with anger, but she had no other choice. For her own life and her mother's life she nodded. Very good. Lung Shiqi stretched out his hand, and several golden silk goo landed on Princess Carol's arm and drilled into her skin. Princess Carol didn't resist at all. Lung Shiqi smiled with satisfaction. Your Highness is truly sensible. How long will it take to nurture the goo king? Princess Carol suppressed her anger, but she didn't show it, replying. Nurturing the goo king is easier said than done. Although there are countless goo worms to use, it will take at least 5 days. Moreover, it might not succeed. Lung Shiqi thought to himself, 5 days, I can accept it. After Prince Gusi inherits the throne, I will have to hold her accountable for this, which will take a few days. Thus he said, fine, but I believe that Princess Carol will succeed. I will come back in 5 days. I hope Princess Carol won't do anything stupid during this time. Saying so, he directly left the goo worm cave and set up a lightning destruction formation and golden silk goo near several goo worm caves. If Princess Carol dared to escape, her fate would be miserable. Afterwards, he didn't leave in a hurry, but went to another goo worm cave and picked over 1,000 goo worms. Even if he could obtain the goo king in the future, these goo worms had their own uses. It would be a waste if he didn't take them. On the other side, Prince Gusi ignored his injuries and led the Imperial Guards at full speed, using only half a day to rush back to King City. The reason why he was so anxious was because Sang and Tong had said that if he succeeded in killing everyone and breaking through to Heaven Origin stage, he would help Elder Chu Li ascend the throne. Therefore, Sang and Tong might have left something in King City, and Prince Gusi had to hurry back to deal with it. Sure enough, when they rushed back to King City, the whole place was solemn, and there were ceremonial guards erected everywhere. It was clearly a ceremony for a new king to ascend the throne. Prince Gusi pulled over a guard and asked, "What's going on?" The guard trembled. Lord Elder Chu Li is preparing to ascend the throne. Impudent. What right does he have to ascend the throne? Who gave him the courage? Prince Gusi already had a guess, but when he heard the answer, he couldn't help but be furious. He finally understood that Sang and Tong had already made all the arrangements. If everything went according to Sang and Tong's plan, Sang and Tong would have succeeded, and Chu Li would have the qualifications to ascend the throne. However, Prince Gusi, was now back. Next, Prince Gusi led a group of Heaven Origin stage experts and 2,000 Imperial Guards into King City. At this time, in the main hall of King City, Elder Chu Li was dressed in king's attire, bowing in front of an old man. The old man was holding a crown in his hand, and his expression was solemn and solemn. Chu Li was in the middle of being crowned. Previously, he claimed that the two princes had given up the fight for the throne, and their whereabouts were unknown. Then, he stood his ground and forcefully held the coronation ceremony. There were also many people who went to look for the two princes, and even the princess consort, but there was no news, and they could only let Chu Li do as he wished. However, just as the crown was about to be placed on Chu Li's head, a guard ran in a panic. Prince Gusi has brought the imperial guards in. Chu Li was shocked, and his body fell to the ground, and the crown fell to the ground with a ding sound. Chapter 392. After Leng Shiqi returned to the post house, he began to count Sang He's mustard seed bracelet. Previously, there were too many people outside, so it was not convenient for him to count. When he opened Sang He's mustard seed bracelet, he found that most of them were spirit stones, and they were not ordinary spirit stones, they were almost all middle-grade spirit stones. Leng Shiqi used his mental power to detect that there were more than 1,000 middle-grade spirit stones. If converted to ordinary spirit stones, it was equivalent to about 100,000 spirit stones. Suddenly receiving such a huge amount of money, even Leng Shiqi felt a little smug. He did not expect Sang Hitong to be so rich. Of course, now it was Leng Shiqi who was rich. With enough spirit stones, he would be able to use the yin and yang spirit convergence array to cultivate without fear. In addition to the spirit stones, there were countless high-grade resources in the mustard seed bracelet, but most of them were useless to him, so he prepared to give them to Nine Leaf. Among the remaining items, Leng Shiqi was most happy with a ring called the Gu God ring. This was the ring that Sang Hitong personally wore. It was a grade 7 ring. This Gu God ring was also a spiritual tool. More accurately, it was a treasure tool. The Gu God ring's greatest use was to allow the Gu God devouring technique to be used to the extreme, and it could greatly increase the power of mental power and spiritual skills. Leng Shiqi had secretly tested it before, and with the support of the divine Gu ring, the power of his spiritual skills had increased by several folds. In addition to the Gu God ring, there were also many spiritual tools. Leng Shiqi kept a few of these things as spares, and prepared to sell the rest to the system to open the map. The most unique among them were the cultivation methods and experiences of various Gu worms. These were the personal possessions of Sang Hitong, the leader of the Gu God sect, and their value was immeasurable. Unfortunately, the Gu God sect had been destroyed, and there were not many people in Zhulu who were proficient in Gu techniques, so these things were somewhat useless. However, Leng Shiqi suddenly had an idea and murmured, "These things may be very useful." When he was almost done, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate. Leng Shiqi's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, but at the same time, his foundation was somewhat unstable. He urgently needed to consolidate it. In addition, he also had many advanced spiritual skills, and it was time for him to deduce and integrate them. Thus, he used the soul-splitting technique to split his consciousness into two halves. While consolidating his cultivation, he also deduced his spiritual technique. 3 days later, Prince Gus held his coronation ceremony. Elder Chu Li, on the other hand, was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. Prince Gus wanted to kill him, but Chu Li's foundation in the imperial court was too deep. Rashly killing him would cause him to lose the support of the people, so he could only remove him from his post and place him under house arrest. Yu Ruifeng, as the special envoy of the Thunderfire dynasty, also went to participate. Leng Shiqi did not go as he needed to settle down, and could not afford to waste any time. Prince Gus, or more precisely King Gus, reorganized the imperial court in the next few days. Those who should be eliminated were eliminated, and those who should be promoted were promoted. The entire imperial city had changed. However, this had nothing to do with Leng Shiqi. On the 5th day he activated the Fate skill. At this time, he was pleasantly surprised to find that the furthest distance he could teleport had expanded from 300 miles to 500 miles. Then he directly teleported to the mountainside of the Gu God Peak. As soon as he appeared, he first checked the Thunder Destruction Array and the Golden Silk Gu that had been set up before. After finding that they were all normal, he felt relieved. Leng Shiqi opened his eyes and immediately found Princess Carol's position. However, her current state did not seem to be very good. The spiritual force in her body was almost exhausted. Beside her, there was a very weak spiritual force aura, which was probably equivalent to a spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm. Leng Shiqi came to Princess Carol's side. Her face was pale as she maintained a seal, controlling a fingernail-sized, mottled Gu worm in front of her. This Gu worm was struggling with all its might. Seeing Leng Shiqi appear, she hurriedly said, Zuoqiu, you're finally here. Give me some pills to recover my spiritual force. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed and he handed over a spirit overflowing pill. This was the most suitable pill for Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators to recover their spiritual force. Princess Carol also showed a trace of surprise. She opened her mouth and swallowed the pill. Her face also had a touch of red. After a long while, the strange goo worm finally settled down and finally drilled into Princess Carol's body. Princess Carol took a deep breath and said, "Fortunately you came. Otherwise, all my efforts would have been for naught." Leng Shiqi also saw that Princess Carol was almost unable to collect the goo worm due to insufficient spiritual force. However, he was puzzled. Was that weak-looking goo worm the legendary Goo King? So he asked, "Princess Carol, did you successfully cultivate the Goo King?" "Yes," Princess Kaluo replied. "This Goo King is the one that survived after countless goo worms killed and devoured each other in several goo worm caves. I used an ancient secret method to refine it, and finally succeeded. However, the Goo King has just been born and is still very weak. It still needs to devour many rare resources to continue evolving." "I see." Leng Shiqi was also a bit surprised. The Goo King born from so many goo worms was actually so weak. As if sensing Leng Shiqi's thoughts, Princess Carol said with a serious expression, "Zuoqiu, don't underestimate the Goo King. Even if it's very weak now, it still has the ability to restrain all goo in the world. After I use it to absorb the goo poison in my mother's body, I will give it to you." Leng Shiqi was silent for a moment. "I don't think there is a need to go through so much trouble." Princess Carol immediately became vigilant. She said solemnly, "Are you going back on your words?" "No." Leng Shiqi shook his head. He stretched out his hand and took out the gold thread goo that was hidden in Princess Carol's body. Princess Carol's heart calmed down a bit, but she did not relax her vigilance. Leng Shiqi said, "There is something you might not know." Next, he told Princess Carol everything that happened on the peak of Gushin Peak. He described it from the perspective of an ordinary person. He did not hide anything. She only needed to ask around and she would know. However, when Princess Carol learned that Bess had died an unnatural death, and Gus had succeeded the throne, her mind went blank. It was as if her sky had collapsed. In fact, it was true. Her parents were the king and his wife, and she was the princess who was loved by everyone. But in just a few days, she lost her parents and her noble status. In fact, as long as she dared to show herself, Gus would send people to kill her to prevent future troubles. Her sky had indeed collapsed. Princess Carol could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. These days, she had been cultivating the Goo King with all her might. Her goal was to detoxify Princess Beth. This was her belief. However, this belief had already collapsed. It turned out that everything she did was useless. Princess Carol said in a mournful voice, "You already knew, didn't you?" Leng Shiqi did not speak. "Yes, you just wanted the Goo King. If you had told me earlier, I would not have cultivated the Goo King. Ridiculous. It turns out I was a chess piece in someone else's hands from beginning to end, being used all along." Her voice became softer and softer. Leng Shiqi could even feel a trace of desire to die from her. However, Leng Shiqi said to her, "Do you want to take revenge?" Princess Carol abruptly raised her head and glared at him, her eyes filled with boundless hatred. Chapter 393. Seeing the hatred in Princess Carol's eyes, Leng Shiqi knew she no longer had the will to die. He said, "Actually, you should know that if you and Princess Consort interfered in the fight for the throne, you would likely end up like this. Even if Sang Hutong did not kill Princess Consort, she would have died at Gus' hands sooner or later. You should be glad you hid in this goo worm cave, otherwise, you would have died long ago." Princess Carol knew Leng Shiqi was speaking the truth, but she did not want to hear it now. She said darkly, "What do you want to say? Have you ever thought about why Princess Consort interfered in the fight for the throne? Why do you think she chose to work with the pro-war faction after knowing she was poisoned? This is like asking a tiger for its skin, but she still did it." Leng Shiqi looked into Princess Carol's eyes and continued, "She did it for you. If I am not wrong, Princess Consort's original intention is for the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction to both suffer losses, and she will benefit from it. If her plan succeeds, do you think it will be her or you who will sit on the throne? Princess Carol bit her lips, her shoulders starting to tremble. Every word Leng Shiqi said seemed to stab at the weakest part of her heart. But Leng Shiqi did not stop. Therefore, only by ascending to the throne of Zhulu country can you truly inherit the will of the king and princess consort. You can truly take revenge for them. And I can help you. Haha. Princess Carol laughed bitterly. Throne? I am alone right now, I have nothing. How can I ascend to the throne? It is simply a fantasy. You cannot do it now, but that does not mean you cannot do it in the future. You can take a look at this first. Saying this, Leng Shiqi took out a mustard seed bag and threw it over. Princess Carol subconsciously caught it and opened the mustard seed bag to take a look. Her pupils shrunk as she showed a shocked expression. This mustard seed bag contained all of Sang Hetong's Gu refinement techniques. There was even the next level of the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring method. Princess Carol knew how precious these things were, but she was even more shocked. How did he obtain them? Leng Shiqi stood with his hands behind his back. He did not explain but said, Your Highness, there are some spirit cultivators who cultivate Gu techniques in Zhulu country. With your talent and the support of these resources, you can establish your own sect. Furthermore, with your means, you can hide your identity and take up an official position in Monarch City. This way, you'll have some followers both inside and outside the city. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you are a princess and have the right to inherit the throne. When the time is right, you will have the opportunity to overthrow Gus. Princess Carol's eyes flickered with uncertainty. It did sound possible, but she shook her head and said, Even if that's the case, I'm afraid the possibility is less than half. I'm digging my own grave by doing this. Of course, that's not all. Leng Shiqi smiled strangely and said, There is also a highly respected old official in Monarch City who has pledged allegiance to us. Although he is under house arrest now, the foundation behind him is still very deep. When the time comes, he will be a great help to you. Although Princess Carol had not come into contact with the outside world, from Leng Shiqi's words, she could guess who that person was. It must be the previous elder, Chu Li. She could not help but be surprised. The other party could actually rope in Chu Li. How many unimaginable methods did they have? In addition, we also have great experts in the unity of Heaven Realm. You don't have to worry about the high-end battle strength. When the time comes, you can contact the royal family and gain some strength. In this way, you really want to overthrow Gus. Princess Carol's breathing became even more rapid. Clearly, she was tempted. Even though the possibility of that happening was still very small, it was still possible. However, she did not let it go to her head. Instead, she frowned and asked, Why are you helping me? Why are you interfering in the battle for the throne of Zhulu country? What do you, or should I say, what do you want? Leng Shiqi raised a finger and said, First you must give me the Gu King. Princess Carol nodded without hesitation. The Gu King was very precious, but Sang Hetong's Gu refinement technique and the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique were more important to her. Leng Shiqi raised a second finger. From now on, I will send people to collect some Gu worms from you every once in a while. Princess Carol understood that the other party wanted to use her to nurture Gu worms. However, this matter was going with the flow, so she agreed. Finally, Leng Shiqi looked deeply at Princess Carol and said meaningfully, After you successfully ascend the throne, you need to join our organization. Hearing this, Princess Carol's eyes widened slightly. She understood. She understood everything. It turned out that the other party did not really want to help her ascend the throne, but wanted to use her to indirectly control the entire Zhulu country. What great ambition! She even thought that even if she really became the king in the future, she might be secretly controlled by the other party. Leng Shiqi saw through her thoughts and said, Princess Carol, don't worry. Our organization is not a sect, but a loose one. Everyone gathered together for mutual benefits. We won't restrict Princess Carol in any way, nor do we want to plot against Zhulu country. We just want a place to live. We will help you take revenge and ascend the throne. And you will provide us with a place to live. Speaking of which, Princess Carol is the one who benefits. And the things in this mustard seed bag are my sincerity. Princess Carol closed her eyes, seemingly hesitating. Lung Shiqi was not in a hurry. He stood at the side and waited quietly. After about a quarter of an hour, Princess Carol's eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes were filled with determination. She only said one word. Okay. Hearing this, Lung Shiqi smiled and said, Princess Carol made a very correct decision. Princess Carol suddenly seemed to have matured a lot. She raised her hand and released a goo worm. It was the Goo King. This is what I promised to give you. Lung Shiqi put away the Goo King with a smile. Your Highness, the throne is not something that can be achieved overnight. We all need to slowly accumulate strength. Therefore, in the next few years, you must lay low and secretly cultivate your forces. That is the way to go. Lung Shiqi did not want Princess Carol to expose herself in her eagerness to take revenge, so he specially reminded her. After that, they set up their contact signs and went their separate ways. The reason why Lung Shiqi would help Princess Carol take back the throne was not empty talk, it was really possible. Sang Hetong had already planted a mind-controlling goo in Chu Li. Sang Hetong was dead, so Chu Li became an important trump card in Lung Shiqi's hands. In terms of battle strength, he also had Tu Deng. Moreover, he could mobilize the assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Presumably, the Blood Garment Pavilion was also very interested in secretly controlling Zhulu country. Of course, the most important thing was Princess Carol's identity. Even if Princess Carol were to openly seize the throne, the Sky Origin stage experts of the Hall of Worship wouldn't interfere. That way, they wouldn't have to deal with the most troublesome force. Moreover, Lung Shiqi had tentatively scheduled this matter for a few years later. By then his strength and influence would not be weak, and Zhulu country would be his target. Chapter 394. The next day, Yu Ruifeng brought Lung Shiqi and a few Dark Thunder Guards into the palace, and finally began their purpose for coming to Zhu Road country, which was to hold them accountable. Actually, at this time, it wasn't that important to hold them accountable, because everyone knew the truth of the matter. All of this was done by Sang and Tong behind the scenes. Therefore, this accountability became a formality. In the end, Zhu Road country paid a considerable amount of resources, and left the matter unsettled. For Yu Ruifeng, although Gus, who was in the pro-war faction, ascended to the throne, Zhu Road country had lost a large number of experts and imperial guards. In the next few years, it would be impossible for them to cause any more trouble. At least he could answer to the higher-ups. After that, Lung Shiqi followed Yu Ruifeng on the journey back to West Desolate Province. When they came, there were more than 20 people, but when they returned, there were only 6 left. Therefore, their speed was even faster and they only took 9 days to return to West Desolate City. As soon as they returned to West Desolate City, Yu Ruifeng plunged into busy matters. They had to carefully consider and report the information of their trip to Zhu Road country. In addition, in the month that Yu Ruifeng left, there was a thick pile of official documents piled up in West Desolate Province. It was enough to keep him busy for a while. Lung Shiqi and Guan Feihong rested in West Desolate City for a day and prepared to return to Lanqi City. Before leaving, he specially went to say goodbye to Yu Ruifeng. Who knew that Yu Ruifeng would make a decision that surprised Lung Shiqi? He actually wanted Lung Shiqi to be the Great Supervisor of the North County, and the current Great Supervisor, Duan Chun, planned to be transferred to the South County to fill the vacancy of Yuan Tsang. This matter was of course a good thing for Lung Shiqi, but he still had a trace of worry in his heart. That was, why did Yu Ruifeng do this? If it was to win him over, he had already given him 10% of the cultivation resources in the Gu God sect. Now not only did he give him resources, but he also wanted to give him an official position. This was a bit too solicitous. Yu Ruifeng was a dignified inspector, yet he was fawning over Lung Shiqi. This made Lung Shiqi suspicious, so he said modestly, "How could this humble servant be qualified to assume the position of Great Inspector?" Yu Ruifeng explained, during this mission in Zhulu country, the elites of the Dark Thunder Guard suffered heavy losses. The South region's Great Supervisor, Yuan-song has died. However, the current inspectors in South County were either too inexperienced or did not have enough cultivation, so it was best to transfer a senior inspector over. Not long ago, you destroyed the profound Yang sect, so you can be said to be famous in the North region. Moreover, you are now at the Spirit Aperture Realm middle stage. With your ability, I believe you can suppress the North region. However, the other inspectors in the North County will not easily submit to me, Leng Shiqi said hesitantly. Yu Ruifeng said meaningfully. That's up to you. Just don't make a big deal out of it. With this, Leng Shiqi smiled in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, Since Sir trusts this humble servant so much, then this humble servant will accept this position. However, this humble servant has a small request. Please allow it. Let's hear it. It's like this. My lord, you've seen how this lowly one obtained his cultivation. This humble servant's cultivation is not very stable right now, so I want to go into seclusion for a while to consolidate my cultivation. Yu Ruifeng lowered his eyes. After thinking for a while he said, Okay, I'll give you 3 months at most. Thank you, sir, for your understanding. A few days later, Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong finally returned to Lanqi City's Dark Thunder Manor after more than a month. When they stepped into Dark Thunder Manor, Wei Guan, who had been promoted to Dark Thunder Guard, saw them immediately. Crash! The books in Wei Guan's hands all fell to the ground. He ran over in surprise and shouted, Sir, you're finally back. When Leng Shiqi saw Wei Guan's surprise and relief, his heart tightened. He asked, Did something happen in Dark Thunder Manor? Wei Guan opened his mouth, but his expression dimmed. He didn't know what to say. At this moment, Qian Ming, Qiu Cheng, and Xiao Qian heard the commotion and rushed over. They all had gloomy expressions. When they saw Leng Shiqi, they finally dispersed. Something really did happen. However, Leng Shiqi was still very calm. He said, Let's go to the meeting hall and talk. After they took a seat in the meeting hall, Leng Shiqi directly asked Qiu Cheng. He was the most qualified person here. Tell me what happened. Qiu Cheng muttered to himself, as if he was organizing his words. Sir, not long after you left, Yuzimo came looking for us. Yuzimo? Who's that? This name sounded familiar to Leng Shiqi, but he definitely didn't know this person. Yuzimo is also a supervisor. The area he is in charge of is adjacent to ours. After he arrived, he immediately asked us to give him half of our monthly tribute. Leng Shiqi's expression sank. His Spirit Aperture Realm 5th layer cultivation was uncontrollably activated, and a formless spirit pressure was released. The others were surprised and delighted. When Leng Shiqi was in the Spirit Pulse Realm, he was able to fight against Spirit Aperture Realm experts. Now that he had broken through to the Spirit Aperture Realm, Yuzimo was no longer a threat. Leng Shiqi's mind was spinning rapidly, but he let Qiu Cheng continue. Of course we didn't want to, but we don't know where Yuzimo found. At this point, Qiu Cheng's eyes flickered. He was a bit hesitant, but he still said, he found evidence that Sir dealt with Gong Sunbing and his cronies. When Qiu Cheng said this, Leng Shiqi could more or less guess the ins and outs of the matter. That Yuzimo was simply jealous of the windfall he made around Lanqi City, but Yuzimo didn't have the ability to imitate Leng Shiqi's methods. Thus, he wanted to take advantage of Lanqi City's absence to interfere. When Leng Shiqi got rid of Gong Sunbing and his cronies, he did leave behind some traces that couldn't be investigated. He didn't expect that Yuzimo, the supervisor, would specifically investigate this matter. In other words, Yuzimo had something on Leng Shiqi and used it to blackmail him and take away the tribute. However, Leng Shiqi thought deeper. Where did Yuzimo get the guts to do this? It wasn't that Leng Shiqi thought too highly of himself. When he left the West Desolate Province, that was when his reputation was at its peak. Moreover, his public smuggling was tacitly approved by Yu Ruifeng. As a supervisor, Yuzimo came looking for trouble right after Leng Shiqi left. Wasn't he afraid that Leng Shiqi would come back for revenge? Obviously, there must be someone behind Yuzimo who was supporting him. That person was undoubtedly Duan Chun. Chapter 395. Duan Chun, the supervisor of the North County, had joined forces with Yuzimo to cause trouble, which gave Leng Shiqi a headache. At this moment, Leng Shiqi made a sound of surprise. Only now did he realize that Qin Jianchen was not here. He asked, "Where is Qin Jianchen?" Qiu Cheng and the others paused for a moment. Qianming continued, "Sir, when Yuzimo first came, Qin Jianchen fought with him, but he was seriously injured by Yuzimo. During this time, he was in seclusion to recuperate, so he did not come to welcome you." Leng Shiqi's face turned completely cold. Traces of killing intent filled the air, causing the temperature of the meeting hall to drop. Qianming saw this and said in a low voice, "Sir, we should not act rashly. After all, Yuzimo has something on us." Leng Shiqi retracted his killing intent, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Yuzimo Duanchan. Passed down the order. They immediately straightened their bodies and waited for Leng Shiqi to give the order. However, Leng Shiqi said, "Yuzimo should know about my return soon. He must be waiting for me to make a move. From today onwards, have all the Dark Thunder Guards withdraw. Do not let anyone have anything on us. If Yuzimo comes to ask for resources next time, do not fight. Give him as much as he wants." What? They were shocked when they heard this. They did not know what Leng Shiqi was trying to do. Guan Feihong, on the other hand, rolled his eyes and laughed sinisterly. He said, "This subordinate obeys." Leng Shiqi stood up and said, "From now on, I will go into seclusion. No matter what happens, I will endure it. Whatever they swallow now, I will make them spit it out twice as much in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, Leng Shiqi took a step forward, and his figure instantly vanished on the spot like a ghost. Qiu Cheng and Qiu Qian were a little confused. Qianming lowered his head thoughtfully. Guan Feihong said, "Do you think that Yuzimo, a supervisor, dares to mess with us? With Sir's strength, it would not be difficult to quietly get rid of Yuzimo. However, Sir's real opponent is the person behind Yuzimo. Since Sir has already given the order, the most important thing for us to do while Sir is in seclusion is to endure." Qiu Qian and Guan Feihong looked at each other, and then nodded solemnly. After Leng Shiqi returned to his room, he released dozens of goo worms to hide around his room to protect him. He waved his hand, sprinkled 500 mid-grade spirit stones into the formation's formation. And in an instant rich heaven and earth spiritual chi quickly gather, the rich heaven and earth spiritual energy quickly, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth quickly, the entire room was filled the room. That was a mist with smoke completely condensed. Then Leng Shiqi sat cross-legged in the center of the yin and yang spirit gathering array, and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. His had come too quickly. Now, what he needed most was to do his best to consolidate it. Then he divided his consciousness into two. While purifying his spiritual energy, he was also constantly deducing and fusing spiritual skills. Finally, Leng Shiqi raised his head and swallowed a fasting pill he found in the mulberry tree. From then on, he entered a state of seclusion. 11 days later, Leng Shiqi opened his eyes. At the same time, his eyes became brighter and brighter. He had also removed the soul-splitting technique. At this moment, his spiritual energy had become much purer. The reason he stopped was because the system's upgrade had been completed. Leng Shiqi opened the system with some anticipation. First of all, the system gave him the first impression that the interface was much more refined. He habitually opened his own information first. Name, Leng Shiqi Lu Xingji Cultivation, Spirit Aperture Realm Level 5 Status, Peak Bloodline, Dark Shadow Clan Unknown Management Authority, 37% System Energy, 13% System Coins, 1382. Leng Shiqi raised his eyebrows. There was an additional entry for System Energy in his information. His eyes narrowed as if he had thought of something. Then he took out a level 4 spiritual sword from his mustard seed bracelet and sold it to the system. He received 168 system coins. Leng Shiqi's eyes were fixed on the word System Energy. Sure enough, after he sold the level 4 spiritual sword, the 13% behind the words suddenly flashed. However, the number did not change. At the same time, an inexplicable, undetectable energy appeared in his body. The energy was very, very weak, but it gave people a very strange feeling. It wasn't spiritual power, nor was it demonic aura or baleful aura. Lung Shiqi couldn't tell what kind of feeling it was, because it disappeared in a flash. Lung Shiqi's eyes flashed. He sold the astral wood spiritual spear he used before to the system. Then he immediately closed his eyes and carefully sensed it. Sure enough, a strand of that strange energy appeared in his body again. Lung Shiqi now understood that the system energy was the energy that the system obtained after he sold the items to the system. Because he had 37% of the system's authority, a small part of the energy was transferred to him. Although he still didn't know what that power was, he was sure that it was something extraordinary. After figuring this out, Lung Shiqi opened his bag, map, and system store. There were 6 more empty slots in his bag, which was a small surprise. The map system did not change much, but there was an additional marking function. As for the number of items in the system store, it increased from 4 to 8. After checking these subsidiary systems, Lung Shiqi looked forward to seeing if there were any changes to the lottery system. After he broke through to the spiritual pulse realm, there were no new lottery options. This time there should be. He clicked on the lottery page, and there was finally an option called Advanced Lottery, which made Lung Shiqi secretly happy. However, when he saw the system coins required for the Advanced Lottery, he was a little shocked. The Advanced Lottery actually required 1,000 system coins. This was the same price as the Unlimited Lottery. However, Lung Shiqi immediately felt that the advantage of the Advanced Lottery over the Unlimited Lottery was that it was more stable. When he had the Unlimited Lottery before, he had gotten the beginner and intermediate prizes several times. It was really a loss. The Advanced Lottery would definitely give him the advanced prizes. Although he could not win a lot with a small amount, he would not lose money. Lung Shiqi wanted to try it twice, but before that, he had something more important to do, which was to activate another subsidiary system. System upgrade successful. Administrator, please select the system you want to activate. Chapter 396. When Lung Shiqi saw the system prompt, he swiped down and 3 alternative subsidiary systems suddenly appeared in front of him. They were Mission System, Pet System, and Equipment System. Among these 3 subsidiary systems, Lung Shiqi could only choose to open one of them. So he began to carefully examine the 3 subsidiary systems. First was the Mission System. Missions were easy to understand. They were nothing more than missions issued by the system. After completing them, he would receive a certain reward. Lung Shiqi looked carefully and found that the mission system also contained many subcategories, such as main missions, daily missions, random missions, travel missions, treasure hunting missions, and so on. It seemed to be quite rich. However, after thinking for a while, Lung Shiqi directly excluded the mission system. There were 2 reasons. First, the system's missions were more or less mandatory. If the mission was just to his liking, it would be fine. But if the mission issued by the system was not something he wanted to do, or if it was not his style of doing things, he would feel very uncomfortable. Of course, the most important thing was that he did not want to be bound by the system's missions. The second reason was that he was traumatized by it. Lung Shiqi remembered very clearly that when he was still on Blood Mist Island, he worked hard to complete the mission. What did he get in the end? A high-grade Mount pill. The heart-wrenching feeling at that time was still imprinted in his heart, leaving him with lingering fear. Therefore, he did not consider the mission system for the time being. Then he began to study the pet system. The pet system also had many small functions, such as pet summoning, pet strengthening, pet upgrading, pet skills, pet equipment. There was a whole bunch of them. It was like a game to cheat money. Lung Shiqi looked at these words, as if he could see the system coins flowing out. He did not need to think at all to know that each of these small functions must require a lot of system coins. In fact, Lung Shiqi was a little tempted because he now had something similar to a pet, the Goo King. He now only knew that the Goo King needed to devour all kinds of rare resources to advance. As for other methods to cultivate the Goo King, he did not know. Even Princess Carol, who cultivated the Goo King, did not know. If he opened the pet system, He could use the system's functions to cultivate the Goo King. Presumably, he would soon have a good combat power. For example, the purple feather on the Blood Mist Island was very convenient to use. Therefore, the pet system was on the Lung Shiqi's list of options. However, whether or not he would choose it would depend on the equipment system. Lung Shiqi then looked at the equipment system. This equipment system was a little different from what Lung Shiqi had imagined. At first, he thought that it was just a system that provided attributes and characteristics when placed in the grid. However, after looking at it for a while, he realized that it was actually a system for strengthening and upgrading equipment. Among the functions, there were equipment strengthening, equipment refining, equipment recasting, equipment embedding, and so on. Seeing these words, Lung Shiqi's eyes lit up. Spiritual weapons could be said to be the most direct way to increase one's strength. He had several level 5 spiritual weapons on him. He even had the Devil Advent Battle Saber, a 6th grade spiritual weapon, and the Divine Goo Ring, a rank 7 treasure. If he activated the equipment system, some of the spiritual equipment that he usually used would be greatly enhanced. The Devil's Arrival Battle Saber might even be upgraded to Tier 7. He was really tempted. However, after looking at the pet system and the equipment system, he felt that the system was trying to trick him into topping up money. Whether it was the pet system or the equipment system, it obviously cost a lot of system coins. However, it could indeed increase his strength. The saying that one could become stronger by topping up money had become true. Lung Shiqi was not afraid of topping up money. As his strength and influence increased, he would be able to obtain more and more resources. It was not a big deal to spend all of it on the system. What he was most conflicted about now was which system to choose. To be honest, he wanted both systems, but he had to give up on one. The pet system was an extra help. The equipment system could strengthen weapons. Lung Shiqi fell into deep thought. After half an hour, Lung Shiqi gritted his teeth and made a decision. He decided to choose the pet system. There were 3 reasons. First of all, Lung Shiqi did not have a high demand for spiritual equipment. He had just obtained the Devil's Arrival Battle Saber and the Divine Goo Ring from the resources of the Goo God sect. These were enough for him to use for a long time. Secondly, no matter how powerful his spiritual equipment was, he was still one person. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. There were many times when he could not split himself. If he could cultivate a powerful pet, it could help him do a lot of things that others did not know about. Thirdly, after activating the pet system, Lung Shiqi did not only cultivate the Goo King as a pet. As long as he was willing to spend money, he could even cultivate several powerful pets at the same time. These were things that the spiritual equipment could not bring him. Therefore, he made this decision. Then he said, "I choose the pet system." Pet system activated. Open the pet space. Lung Shiqi saw a stream of light flash on the system interface. There was an additional pet option. He immediately opened the pet system and found that there were only 3 small functions: pet summon, pet bind, and pet upgrade. As for the rest, he was afraid that he would have to wait for the system to be upgraded again. Lung Shiqi first opened the pet summon page. There were 2 ways to summon pets: normal summon and advanced summon. Normal summon costs 500 system coins per summon. The potential of the summoned pet would be between white, green, and blue. Advanced summon costs 3,000 system coins per summon. The potential of the pet would be between blue, purple, and gold. In other words, the worst pet that could be drawn from the advanced lottery would be a blue pet. Lung Shiqi's mouth twitched when he saw the price of the pet summon. The system was really cheating him. Fortunately, he already had the Goo King and did not need to summon pets. Therefore, he clicked on the pet bind page. Now Lung Shiqi could only have 1 pet at most. He immediately summoned the Goo King, and a system prompt appeared in front of his eyes. Discovered a purple pet. Bind. Lung Shiqi was a little surprised when he heard that the Goo King's potential was purple. Although the Goo King had the word king, it was only cultivated from many ordinary goo worms. Moreover, the cultivation method was not very good. Lung Shiqi was slightly happy that it had a purple quality. This helped him save thousands of system coins. He immediately said, "Yes." Immediately, Lung Shiqi suddenly felt an inexplicable connection between himself and the Goo King. He could order the Goo King to do anything at any time. Even if he asked it to self-destruct now, it would not hesitate at all. Finally, Lung Shiqi looked at the pet upgrade option that he cared about the most. The reason why he chose the pet system was that he wanted to increase the Goo King's strength in a short period of time, so that it could help him do something. The pet upgrade page was very simple. It showed that the Goo King's current level was a rank 1 monster. There were 2 ways to upgrade a pet. One was to feed it experience pills. There would be a special slot in the system shop for experience pills. The other was to follow the master and cultivate. When the master cultivated, the pet would share 10% of the experience. Of course, for Lung Shiqi, there was a third way. That was to let it eat all kinds of rare materials. Lung Shiqi thought about it and decided to use all 3 methods. Chapter 397. Lung Shiqi logged out of the system and took out all the resources he didn't need. They almost filled up his room. Then he divided the resources into 3 parts. He kept the most precious high-grade resources and prepared to give them to 9 Leave. He didn't forget that he still owed half of the resources to Xianyang sect. Originally, he planned to give 9 Leave the resources of the big families in several cities. Although the quality of these people's resources was a bit low, there were a lot of them. However, Duanchun and Yuzimo intervened halfway, so there weren't many resources left. So Lung Shiqi had to keep some for himself. The rest was divided into 2 parts. One part was to be sold to the system, and the other part was to be eaten by the Goo King. Lung Shiqi waved his hand, and the large pile of resources in front of him suddenly disappeared into the world, turning into more than 6,000 system coins. Combined with what he had before, he now had 8,000 system coins. He opened the shop system again. After opening the pet system, the shop system had also changed. There were 2 sub-options, random and pet. Lung Shiqi clicked on the pet shop. There were 2 boxes selling beginner pet experience pills and intermediate pet experience pills. The prices were 100 system coins and 300 system coins, respectively. Lung Shiqi frowned. He had quite a lot of system coins, but it was still far from enough to cover all his expenses. This was because he also wanted to open the map system. Just this alone would cost him 10,000 system coins. In addition, he had just activated the advanced lottery option, and he really wanted to try it out a few times. In this way, he was really a little stretched. Lung Shiqi hesitated for a moment, then bought 10 beginner pet experience pills to see the effects. He fed 1 beginner pet experience pill to the Goo King. Then, the Goo King's body flashed, and its aura soared, instantly reaching the limit of a rank 1 monster. Lung Shiqi was delighted. It seemed that the beginner pet experience pill was quite effective. He fed it another pill, and the Goo King's body began to swell. Its body grew 2 or 3 times bigger, and it was already the size of a thumb. And it was already a 2nd-rank demonic beast. 2 basic pet experience pills had allowed the Goo King to advance to Tier 2. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but smile. However, he couldn't smile after that. This was because after the Goo King was promoted to Stage 2, the effect of the beginner pet experience pill was greatly reduced. Even after eating the remaining 8 pills, he still didn't advance. Lung Shiqi had no choice but to feed it the resources that he had prepared. After swallowing 30 to 40% of the resources, the Goo King finally showed signs of advancement. However, the Goo King had also fallen into a deep slumber because of this. It seemed that the qualitative change between rank 2 and rank 3 still required a slow evolution. Lung Shiqi placed the Goo King into the pet slot. Then he looked at the remaining 7,000 system coins and decided to try the advanced lottery draw twice. As for the remaining 5,000 gold coins, he would save them for the time being. Not only would he be able to prepare for the opening of the entire map, but he would also be able to purchase items from the random shop at any time. He clicked on the lottery page and immediately clicked on the advanced lottery draw twice. A dazzling light flashed, and 2 things appeared in front of him. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, Supreme Grade Sharp Spear Talisman. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the advanced prize, Soaring Feather. Lung Shiqi picked up the two items. The supreme-grade sharp spear talisman was a piece of purple gold talisman paper. It was a kind of item that strengthened spiritual weapons. After using it, it could greatly increase the sharpness of the spiritual weapon. He immediately took out the ink jade sword and the demon's arrival battle saber. These were the two spiritual weapons that he used most frequently, and were also the strongest. He looked at the ink jade sword and then looked at the demon's arrival battle saber. After thinking for a while, he still felt that the supreme-grade sharp spear talisman was more suitable for the ink jade sword. The demon's arrival battle saber was already an upper-grade stage 6 spiritual weapon. Even if he used the supreme-grade sharp spear talisman on it, it wouldn't be able to advance to stage 7. At most, it would just be icing on the cake. This was because spiritual weapons above stage 7 didn't just need to be sharp and tough. They also needed to have their spirituality activated. Therefore, it was more suitable to use it on the ink jade sword. Lung Shiqi placed the supreme-grade sharp spear talisman on the ink jade sword. In a split second, the ink jade sword released rays of purple and gold light. The sword body also started to tremble in his hand. Traces of sharpness constantly assaulted his face, causing Lung Shiqi to feel waves of pain on his face. After a moment, the ink jade sword suddenly screeched. The light on the sword body suddenly converged. The ink jade sword actually advanced to stage 6 spiritual weapon. Lung Shiqi was surprised and happy. He held the ink jade sword and felt the sharpness on it. He couldn't help but smile. Although he didn't choose to activate the equipment system, he used the lottery to advance the ink jade sword. Now he had 2 stage 6 spiritual weapons. This was something that normal spirit aperture stage cultivators wouldn't even dare to think about. He didn't have to worry about spiritual weapons for a short period of time. He was also a little glad that he chose the pet system. Putting away the ink jade sword, Lung Shiqi picked up the pure white feather beside it. This was the soaring feather. It was a tool used to strengthen wings. Unfortunately, Lung Shiqi didn't have wings. Although he had some soaring sky goo that could allow him to stay in the air for a short period of time, they weren't real wings. Thus, he could only leave the soaring feather to collect dust. In the end, the only thing Lung Shiqi had to do was to enter the infinite lottery again. Every time the system was upgraded, it would give Lung Shiqi a free unlimited lottery draw. However, for the current Lung Shiqi, he wasn't looking forward to the unlimited lottery draw. After all, he had suffered a lot in it. Thus, Lung Shiqi casually clicked on the infinite lottery. The system prompt appeared. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, Desert Golden Sand. Seeing that he only got the intermediate prize, Lung Shiqi thought to himself, as expected. As for the Desert Golden Sand, it was a pretty good refining material. He directly took it to the bottom of his chest. At this point, after the system upgraded, he had done all the things he needed to do. He had also done all the research he needed to do. After Lung Shiqi tidied up, he once again entered a state of cultivation. However, what he didn't know was that in these 2 days, Yuzimo brought people to Dark Thunder Manor in Lanqi City. Yuzimo had long known that Lung Shiqi had returned. He thought that Lung Shiqi would be furious and go to settle accounts with him. He even prepared how to deal with it and how to suppress Lung Shiqi. But what Yuzimo didn't expect was that he didn't see Lung Shiqi's shadow even after waiting for several days in his own territory. He asked around and found out that Lung Shiqi actually went into closed-door cultivation after returning. This made Yuzimo a little surprised and doubtful. He, Yuzimo, had swallowed half of Lung Shiqi's resources and even injured Qin Jianchen. How could Lung Shiqi tolerate this? As far as he knew, Lung Shiqi was absolutely not like this. Gradually, it was Yuzimo who couldn't sit still anymore. He hesitated for a day or two before deciding to personally come to Lanqi City to test things out. Chapter 398. Yuzimo led a few Dark Lightning emissaries into Dark Thunder Manor, waving his hand to summon a few Dark Lightning guards. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "Where's your supervisor, Lu Xingji? Call him out." Yuzimo's attitude was extremely arrogant. He was on the same level as Lung Shiqi, but he had crossed the jurisdiction of Dark Thunder Manor without permission. He had even specifically asked to see Lung Shiqi. This kind of behavior could be said to be condescending. And the reason he did this was to provoke Leng Shiqi. It would be best if Leng Shiqi could take the initiative to attack him. Then he would have another weakness in his hands, and he would definitely be able to control Leng Shiqi. However, the Dark Lightning Guard in front of him said expressionlessly, Lord Lu is in seclusion and is not receiving guests. This Dark Lightning Guard was actually an assassin from Bloodcloak Pavilion, so he naturally wouldn't give Yuzimo any face. Seclusion? What seclusion? Call him out. Yuzimo directly roared. At this time, Guan Feihong, Xiao Qian, and the other Dark Lightning emissaries heard the commotion and hurried over. Guan Feihong revealed a kind smile, stepped forward and cupped his fists. So Lord Yu has arrived. Please come in. Yuzimo stared at Guan Feihong. He hadn't seen Guan Feihong the last time he came. He heard that Leng Shiqi had brought Guan Feihong to Zhilu. Now it seemed that this Guan Feihong wasn't easy to deal with. Yuzimo said sternly, You're not worthy to speak to me. Call Lu Xingji out. Lord Lu is already in seclusion. He said that everything in Dark Thunder Manor will be managed by me. So this one can more or less make some decisions. You can really make decisions. Yuzimo's eyes flashed with a suspicious look. This one can make decisions on ordinary matters. Guan Feihong didn't say too much. Humph. Yuzimo snorted. What I'm about to say isn't ordinary. Since you can't make decisions, you should call Lu Xingji out. Guan Feihong's smile did not diminish in the slightest. He said Sir also said that if something big happens, we should put it aside first and deal with it after he comes out of seclusion. Yuzimo's face turned gloomy. You mean Lu Xingji won't come out to see me? Sir Yu, please don't make things difficult for me. Guan Feihong's smile became even more amiable. But Yuzimo said, What if I insist on making things difficult for you? Guan Feihong smiled and said, Lord, you must be joking. Why would Lord Yu bother with us subordinates? The more Yuzimo talked with Guan Feihong, the more he felt that the man was slippery. What Guan Feihong meant was that if he made things difficult for the Dark Lightning envoys, he would lose his status. However, if he didn't make things difficult for them, it would be equivalent to slapping his own face. Suddenly Yuzimo laughed. Ha ha ha, this envoy was just joking with you all. Why take it so seriously? Ha 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 ha. Qiu Cheng and the others also laughed, but their laughter was extremely awkward. Guan Feihong waved his arm and said, Please come inside for a chat. Yuzimo didn't say anything and went straight into the meeting hall. When he saw the jade chair in the main seat, he sneered in his heart. He secretly thought that Leng Shiqi really knew how to enjoy life. Then he sat down on the jade chair with a look of enjoyment on his face. Guan Feihong was still able to maintain his smile, but the faces of the others fell. Yuzimo patted the chair and said, Oh, this chair is really good. Only someone as rich as Lord Lu can afford to sit on it. Speaking of this, Yuzimo suddenly changed the topic. Unfortunately, this envoy's purse is shy. Someone come. At this time Guan Feihong suddenly shouted. Yuzimo was slightly surprised and secretly became vigilant. He thought that Leng Shiqi had set a trap. But then, a group of people carried dozens of large wooden boxes to the door of the meeting hall. Guan Feihong pointed to the boxes and said, Lord Yu, these things are the offerings that the various great clans have handed over this month. Half of them are here. Please accept them. Yuzimo didn't show any expression of joy. Instead, his expression became serious. His purpose in coming here was to anger Leng Shiqi, including these Dark Lightning envoys. But now not only was the other party not angry, but they were also offering up so many resources. He immediately thought of Leng Shiqi's intention, and that was to delay. But Yuzimo didn't want to delay. He looked at the boxes and said angrily, This is just a little bit of resources? Are you trying to fool me? Lord Yu, half of the offerings are here. If Lord Yu doesn't believe me, I can have someone bring the accounts. Half? Yuzimo smiled darkly. Who told you that I wanted half? From today onwards, you will give me 70%. What? 70%. Xiao Qian and the others were shocked and angry. Even Guan Feihong's smile faded a little. He could see that Yuzimo had come here to cause trouble. His goal was to force Leng Shiqi out. Guan Feihong even guessed that all of this was supported by Duan Chun. Although Leng Shiqi had told him to give Yu Zimo as much as he wanted before he went into seclusion, this time, he had given him 70%. What about next time? What about next time? In the end, if Yu Zimo took it all, would they give it to him or not? Just as Guan Feihong didn't know how to respond, a voice sounded. Don't even think about it. The voice sounded very calm, but it was filled with an unquestionable tone. Everyone looked at the door. At this time, there stood a figure dressed in black holding a long sword. It was Qin Jianchen, and his cultivation was at the Spirit Aperture Realm. Qin Jianchen's appearance at the Spirit Aperture Realm was beyond everyone's expectations. Even Guan Feihong and the other Dark Lightning envoys were shocked. Qin Jianchen had been seriously injured by Yu Zimo some time ago and should still be recovering. How could he have broken through to the Spirit Aperture Realm? Of course, the most shocked person was Yu Zimo. He remembered clearly that when he first came here, Qin Jianchen was the only one who had stopped him. At first, Yu Zimo didn't put Qin Jianchen, who was at the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm, in his eyes. After all, he was at the 6th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. But Qin Jianchen's sword was too fast. It was so fast that it was strange. It was so fast that Yu Zimo felt threatened. Therefore, Yu Zimo had no choice but to take it seriously, which was why he had seriously injured Qin Jianchen. However, in just a month, Qin Jianchen had not only recovered from his injuries, but his cultivation had also broken through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. How could Yu Zimo not be shocked? Qin Jianchen gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and said, "Thanks to you, my cultivation has improved. I don't know if you can still seriously injure me today." Chapter 399. Yu Zimo opened his mouth to say something, but Qin Jianchen's sword had already arrived. The others didn't even see when Qin Jianchen's sword had struck. They only saw the black sword light, which was as thin as a strand of hair, arrive in front of Yu Zimo. Yu Zimo hastily used his spirit armor, and at the same time, a sword appeared in his hand. The sword was covered in blue light, and a blue sword light was slashed out like a waterfall. However, Qin Jianchen's sword easily pierced through the blue waterfall and tore apart Yu Zimo's spirit armor. When the tip of the sword was about to pierce Yu Zimo's heart, he hurriedly punched out. A pair of gloves covered his fist, which bloomed with a dense spirit light, greeted the attack. With an ear-piercing sound of collision, Yu Zimo's body knocked over the jade chair, and he was forced back 8 steps. Qin Jianchen, on the other hand, was only forced back 3 steps. Yu Zimo's fists were still trembling slightly, and 2 cracks had appeared on his gloves. His heart was filled with shock, anger, hatred, and even a bit of shame and annoyance. He was at the 6th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm, but he had actually lost to Qin Jianchen, who had just entered the Spirit Aperture Realm. Even if Qin Jianchen's attack had been very sudden, it shouldn't have been like this. This could only mean that Qin Jianchen's strength was very strong. However, for Qin Jianchen, being able to force Yu Zimo back a few steps was already his limit. Moreover, he could only use that sword technique a few times. If he were to fight Yu Zimo head-on, he didn't have much confidence. However, Qin Jianchen still stared coldly at Yu Zimo, as if he would fight him to the death. At this time, the 3 Dark Lightning envoys who had followed Yu Zimo finally reacted, but Qianming, Qiucheng, and the others stepped forward to block them. The atmosphere in the meeting room instantly became tense. Although Yu Zimo was surprised in his heart, he thought about it for a moment and became happy instead. He immediately shouted, "How bold of you! You dare to offend your superior? Where are the rules of the Dark Lightning Guard?" Gu Xiaoping. "I am here," a Dark Lightning envoy behind Yu Zimo replied. "Offending your superior? What is the punishment?" According to the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, cripple his cultivation and send him to the death cell. Yu Zimo sneered as he looked at Qin Jianchen. "Last time I didn't pursue the matter because you were seriously injured. This time, you actually dared to attack me in public. You really haven't changed." Guan Feihong also felt that Qin Jianchen was being a little impulsive, which gave Yu Zimo another opportunity to use against him. However, he didn't blame Qin Jianchen. When Leng Shiqi explained the matter, Qin Jianchen wasn't present. Everyone knew that he was recuperating, so they didn't disturb him. Moreover, Qin Jianchen was now in the spirit aperture realm. If he was in the Blood Cloak Pavilion, he would be a silver-striped Blood Cloak assassin, which was one level higher than Guan Feihong. Even if Qin Jianchen wanted to blame him, he had no right to do so. Qin Jianchen did not answer Yu Zimo, but the fighting spirit in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Yu Zimo also frowned. He had fought with Qin Jianchen twice, and he knew very well that if he wanted to take down Qin Jianchen, he would have to use his trump card. If he was not careful, he might end up getting injured. But if he didn't make a move, wouldn't he lose face by saying such big words? The Dark Thunder Manor of Mist Qi City was really strange. With the old fox Guan Feihong and the stubborn madman Qin Jianchen, he felt a bit of a headache. 70%. 70% it is. At this time Guan Feihong shouted. He said to Yu Zimo, "Lord Yu, I will send someone to deliver 70% of the resources to your manor." Guan Feihong's timely words gave Yu Zimo a way out of the embarrassing situation. He nodded his head with satisfaction and said, "Well, it seems you have a clear view of the situation. In that case, I will not pursue Qin Jianchen's offense. I still have important matters to attend to, so I will take my leave. Oh right, I will be back at this time next month." Ha ha ha. After Yu Zimo left Dark Thunder Manor with a smile, everyone's face was gloomy. Especially Qiao Qian and Qiu Cheng. They had never suffered such humiliation before. They only felt that their hearts were filled with unwillingness. Qin Jianchen, who had always been a man of few words, said at this time, "I am still too weak." It was unknown whether he was saying this to himself or to everyone else. After he finished speaking, he strode away like a meteor. The remaining few people, except for Guan Feihong, secretly clenched their fists. After this, the entire Dark Thunder Manor of Mist Qi City fell into silence. Apart from the tasks that needed to be completed, everyone threw themselves into cultivating crazily. Time passed in the blink of an eye. 3 months later, Lung Shiqi finally pushed open the door to his room. The biggest difference between the current Lung Shiqi and the one from 3 months ago was that he was much calmer. His eyes were as calm and tranquil as an ancient well, but under the surface of the water, it seemed to have the power to set off huge waves at any time. Lung Shiqi walked out of his room and saw the long-awaited sunlight. He couldn't help but squint his eyes for a while. Wei Guan, who had been waiting here, immediately ran over and bowed. "Congratulations on coming out of seclusion, Lord." Lung Shiqi nodded lightly and said, "Prepare some food for me first." "Yes." Wei Guan left in a jog, while Lung Shiqi casually strolled around his courtyard. Speaking of which, he seemed to have never walked around his courtyard before. After walking around like this for a while, he felt comfortable all over. Not long after, Guan Feihong, Qin Jianchen, and the other 4 Dark Thunder envoys all came to the courtyard. Lung Shiqi saw that Qin Jianchen's cultivation was actually at the Spirit Aperture realm, and couldn't help but be a little surprised. However, this surprise was immediately replaced by joy. Qin Jianchen's battle strength far exceeded that of other cultivators of the same level. Although he was only at the first level of the Spirit Aperture realm, he could definitely fight against a third-level cultivator. This could be considered a great help. Lung Shiqi scanned everyone, and discovered that their cultivation had improved by quite a bit. Qiu Cheng and Qian Ming were both at the peak of the 6th level of the Spirit Aperture realm, and could break through to the 7th level at any time. The one with the greatest improvement was still Qiao Qian. Lung Shiqi remembered that when he first came to Lanqi City, Qiao Qian had just broken through to the Spirit Aperture realm. Now only half a year had passed, and he was already at the 3rd level of the Spirit Aperture realm. With his youth and aptitude, he could indeed be called a genius. As for Lung Shiqi himself, after 3 months of closed-door cultivation, his cultivation was still at the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture realm. However, the spiritual energy in his body was abnormally dense and pure. Moreover, his strength was much stronger than 3 months ago. However, he didn't know how strong he was now, so he had to find someone to test it out. The few people first congratulated Lung Shiqi. Then Guan Feihong began to talk about serious matters. He first talked about Yu Zimo's arrogance in the past 3 months, then said, "Sir, in 2 days, it will be time to submit the offerings. I'm afraid Yu Zimo will come again." When Leng Shiqi heard this, he muttered, "Just in time to practice. Qiucheng, go and send a message to Sir Yu Ruifeng." Chapter 400. 2 days later, the courtyard of Dark Thunder Manor was filled with hundreds of large chests, almost filling up the entire courtyard. Leng Shiqi and a few of his Dark Thunder guards were having tea in the meeting room. Leng Shiqi had been eating fasting pills for the past 3 months, so the taste in his mouth was bitter. Now that he had a full meal and had some tea, his heart was filled with satisfaction. However, the others were not as relaxed. They also knew that Leng Shiqi was already at the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Although they were shocked, they still couldn't feel happy. Leng Shiqi indeed had a high chance of beating Yu Zimo, but what about after that? Yu Zimo would definitely not let go of this and report it to Duan Chun, which would lead to even more trouble. So, how could they still be in the mood to drink tea? However, they all understood Leng Shiqi's temperament. Once he made a decision, no one could change it. Not long after, 4 people walked in from outside. Seeing how they walked in, those who didn't know would think that they were the masters of Dark Thunder Manor. Yu Zimo looked around at the chests in the courtyard and couldn't help but grin. These were all his. He raised his head and walked into the meeting room. He subconsciously wanted to sit on the jade chair, but then he realized that there was already someone sitting there. The moment he saw Leng Shiqi, he was surprised and said, "Oh, isn't this Lord Lu?" He didn't get the news that Leng Shiqi had come out, but he could see that Leng Shiqi was already at the Spirit Aperture Realm. However, he couldn't determine which level of the Spirit Aperture Realm he was at, so he was really surprised. However, in his opinion, Leng Shiqi was only at the 1st level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Leng Shiqi took a sip of tea, glanced at him, and asked Guan Feihong, "Who is this guy?" Hearing this, Yu Zimo's expression immediately changed. How could Leng Shiqi not know him? Yet Leng Shiqi was asking someone else. This was clearly not putting him in his eyes. Guan Feihong even stood up and introduced him to Leng Shiqi. "Sir, this is also the supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards, Yu Zimo, Sir Yu." Yu Zimo coldly stared at Guan Feihong, but Guan Feihong did not care at all. "Yu Zimo? Never heard of it." Leng Shiqi said softly. Even though his voice was soft, the weakest person present was at the Spirit Pulse realm. Everyone could hear him clearly. This time, Yu Zimo did not get angry. He could see that Leng Shiqi was trying to intimidate him. However, he had come prepared. Yu Zimo sneered and said, "It is not easy to see Sir Lu. I have always wanted to see Sir Lu because I want to show you a few things." As he spoke, he took out a few thin booklets from his mustard seed bag and placed a small bundle on the table. Leng Shiqi only glanced at it and lost interest. It was definitely evidence of him getting rid of Gong Sunbing and his subordinates. "Sir Lu, are you not interested in the things inside?" Yu Zimo saw that Leng Shiqi was not moved at all, so he said with a sinister smile, "Ai." Suddenly, Leng Shiqi let out a deep sigh. The sneer on Yu Zimo's face became even stronger. Leng Shiqi said, "Some people think they are smart. They are being used as pawns by others, but they are still complacent. Some people are about to die, but they do not know. How pitiful." "Who are you talking about?" Of course, Yu Zimo could hear that Leng Shiqi was mocking him, so he immediately shouted. However, he did not notice that at this time, Guan Feihong and the others began to silently retreat. Leng Shiqi turned his head and looked directly at Yu Zimo. His eyes were as calm as water, but it was this calm gaze that made Yu Zimo feel a sense of crisis. Immediately, Leng Shiqi pushed his palm forward. Suddenly, the heaven and earth spiritual qi went berserk, and a rich dark golden brilliance appeared, condensing into a strange palm print more than 2 feet wide. The moment the palm print appeared, the power of the golden sun and the power of the underworld appeared at the same time. These 2 completely opposite powers were perfectly fused together by Leng Shiqi. Just the remnants of the aura that was released made Xiao Qian, an early-stage spirit pulse stage cultivator, pale. How could Yu Zimo have thought that Leng Shiqi would suddenly make a move? However, with his experience with Qin Jianchen, He knew that it was too late to dodge. Ignoring everything else, Yuzumo's spiritual chi surged wildly, and on his right arm, sparkling spiritual veins and dozens of bright spiritual cavities appeared. His fist was covered with gloves, and when he punched out, dozens of huge fist shadows appeared. Each fist shadow was filled with a huge amount of power. However, these fist shadows were instantly shattered by Lung Shiqi's palm print. The palm print's power did not decrease at all, and continued to press forward. So strong! Yuzumo was finally shocked. In the face of danger, he hurriedly took out a light green talisman. A trace of heartache flashed across his eyes, and he tore open the talisman. In an instant, the meeting hall emitted a green light, and the earth trembled. Branches as thick as buckets broke out of the ground, intertwining with each other and blocking in front of him. At the same time, he quickly retreated. Bang, bang, bang. Only the sound of branches breaking could be heard. Finally, with a boom, the entire meeting hall, along with the branches, collapsed. The remaining power of Lung Shiqi's palm print made Yuzumo's throat taste sweet, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Yuzumo looked at the ruins of the meeting hall in horror, and even his mind was a little absent-minded. He was at the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm, and no matter where he went, he could be called an expert. However, in front of that palm print, he was as weak as a low-level spirit cultivator. He even used his own trump card, a 5th-level talisman, but in the end, he was still seriously injured. Now there was only one thought in his mind. How strong is Lu Xingji? And this move used by Lung Shiqi was one of his gains in the past 3 months. He had combined the 2 5th-level spirit techniques, the Great Golden Breaking Mountain Seal, and the Cold Underworld Palm Print, to form the current Great Yang Underworld Palm Print. Up to the Golden Sun, down to the 9 underworlds. The ultimate move created by the fusion of 2 5th-level spirit techniques was comparable to a 6th-level spirit technique, and was even stronger than an ordinary 6th-level spirit technique. In addition, Lung Shiqi had several high-level cultivation techniques, and his own strength was far superior to Yuzumo's. That was why he was able to injure Yuzumo, who had used his trump card, in one move. Lung Shiqi had succeeded in one move, and he did not want to give Yuzumo any chance to breathe. His eyes flashed with a colorful light. In Yuzumo's eyes, Lung Shiqi had actually transformed into 4 giants that were hundreds of feet tall, like the legendary gods and demons, looking at him as if he was looking at ants. 5 Gods Spirit Intimidation Technique. Chapter 401. The 5 Gods Intimidation Technique was a high-level illusion technique that originated from the 5 Gods Flowing Light Technique. Lung Shiqi had already cultivated it to the realm of large success with his own comprehension. Moreover, with the support of his majestic mental energy and the divine Gu Ring, he had instantly caused Yuzumo, a cultivator at the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm, to fall into the illusion. This was also the moment when Lung Shiqi caught Yuzumo's mind off guard. Yuzumo's mind was temporarily controlled by the 5 Gods Intimidation Technique. Lung Shiqi waved his arms, and hundreds of sword chi rose behind him. The color of these sword chi was very strange. Every sword chi was red and blue, but the color was very light and looked a little translucent. Each of these sword chis was a combination of pulse-punching sword chis, frigid frost sword chis, and Shaoyang sword chis. Every single sword chi was comparable to a 5th-tier spiritual skill, but Lung Shiqi had unleashed over 100 sword chis of the 3 severing sword. The sword chi whistled through the air and shot over. Gu Xiaoping, who had come with Yuzumo, saw that Yuzumo was in danger, but he was still in a daze. His expression changed and he flicked his fingers, causing a few finger attacks to hit Yuzumo's body. Yuzumo was attacked by Gu Xiaoping, but it helped him recover a trace of consciousness. He relied on this trace of consciousness to instantly burn his essence blood, and finally get rid of the illusion of the 5 Gods Intimidation Technique. After burning his essence blood, Yuzumo's battle strength was comparable to the late stage of the spirit aperture realm, but he did not fight back. Instead, he chose to escape. Yuzumo took out a spirit sword, and the blue sword chi rolled back, shattering the sword chi of the 3 Gods Intimidation Technique one after another. However, there were too many sword chi. Even if Yuzumo tried his best to dodge, There were still 20 to 30 sword chi of the three gods' intimidation technique that hit him. When the sword chi entered his body, Yuzimo's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. What shocked him even more was that after the strange sword chi entered his body, there were three completely different forces that burst out. One of them was as hot as fire, constantly burning his meridians and flesh. Another one was as cold as ice, freezing his body. The last one actually sealed his meridians, causing his spirit chi to not flow smoothly. What kind of sword chi was this? Yuzimo's body was already in a mess, and he couldn't move for a moment. His heart was extremely shaken, and he was already regretting it. Even if he had information on Lung Shiqi, he did not expect Lung Shiqi's strength. Lung Shiqi is too strong. He was so powerful that he was terrified. Would he be able to control such a person? At this moment, Yuzimo only wanted to hide at Duan Chun's place when he returned. All the plans against Lung Shiqi would be left to Duan Chun. There was nothing he could do. However, no matter how much he calculated, he did not consider one thing. That was Lung Shiqi's courage and Lung Shiqi's determination to kill him. Lung Shiqi pointed his finger, and a blood-red lightning bolt as thick as an arm shot out. In the blink of an eye, it blasted Yuzimo's head into pieces. Gu Xiaoping and the other two were instantly dumbfounded. Yuzimo was dead? Yuzimo was actually dead. They looked at Lung Shiqi's calm expression, and their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. The three of them were terrified of Lung Shiqi's strength, and even more terrified of Lung Shiqi's madness. Lung Shiqi actually dared to kill Yuzimo, who was also a supervisor. According to the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, this was a life for a life, but he still did it. What made Gu Xiaoping and the other two even more terrified was that Lung Shiqi's gaze turned towards them. Lung Shiqi's gaze was still very calm. He looked at the three of them as if he was looking at three lifeless rocks. "Run!" Gu Xiaoping shouted, and then used all his strength to explode with the fastest speed in his life to escape Dark Thunder Manor. However, he had only taken 2 steps when he realized that he could no longer move. Gu Xiaoping looked down and saw that the ground was actually covered with spider webs, and the ground of the entire courtyard was like a swamp. Not only was it difficult for him to move, it was also slowly sinking him into it. This was the bone spirit spider web formation that Lung Shiqi created by combining the Gu spirit spider web and the hand of earth. It was used to trap enemies. Not only Gu Xiaoping, but the other two were the same. Lung Shiqi once again unleashed hundreds of triple extinction sword chi, and the sword chi fell like rain. Screams were heard, and Gu Xiaoping and the other two were all dead. He secretly absorbed their remnant souls, and frowned unhappily. A good meeting room was destroyed, what a pity. Lung Shiqi's subordinates, with the exception of Qin Jianchen, were all shocked as well. They were shocked by Lung Shiqi's strength, and even more shocked by Lung Shiqi's courage. Yuzimo was a supervisor, and he was killed just like that? They had all guessed that Lung Shiqi would attack, but they never thought that Lung Shiqi would kill. Guan Feihong was the first to wake up. What he was most worried about was what to do next. Since they had already been killed, they could not be revived. Lung Shiqi killed a supervisor and 3 dark lightning envoys. The supervisor of the North County, Duan Chun, would definitely not sit by and do nothing. The most important thing now was to think of a way to deal with Duan Chun. Guan Feihong was just about to speak when he saw that Lung Shiqi actually went to pick up Yuzimo's personal mustard seed bag. Looking at his expression, he did not seem to care about this matter. Guan Feihong's mouth was open for a long time, but he could not say anything. He knew that Lung Shiqi was not an impulsive person. Since Lung Shiqi did this, he must have thought of what to do next. Right now, he only needed to listen to Lung Shiqi's orders. After picking up the mustard seed bag, Lung Shiqi asked, "Where is the Dark Lightning Manor under Yuzimo's jurisdiction?" Guan Feihong immediately replied, "It's in Deer Marshal City, about 300 li from here." Lung Shiqi nodded. Qiu Cheng, Qiao Qian and Qin Jianchen will stay behind and finish building the meeting hall. Old Guan and Qian Ming will come with me to Deer Marshal City. The 5 of them said in unison, "We obey." After that, Lung Shiqi brought Guan Feihong and Qian Ming to Deer Marshal City. As for the remaining people, Qin Jianchen went back to consolidate his cultivation. His role in Dark Lightning Manor was to use his martial strength to intimidate the weak. Qiao Qian immediately sent people to the courtyard to prepare to rebuild the meeting hall. As for Qiu Cheng, he used all of his intelligence methods to seal up everything that happened today. 2 days later, Leng Shiqi and the other two arrived at Deer Marshall City. The scale of Deer Marshall City was slightly larger than Misty City. It was not as remote as Misty City, and there were more merchants coming and going. At this time, Leng Shiqi, Guan Feihong and Yu Zimo walked together to the entrance of Deer Marshall City's Dark Lightning Manor. Yu Zimo put on an extremely ugly expression as he walked in. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Men, open the treasury's door." Chapter 402. Yu Zimo had 4 Dark Lightning envoys under him. Now that 3 of them were dead, only Lu Ziming was left in Dark Lightning Manor. Lu Ziming was also a veteran. He didn't open the door to the treasury. Instead, he hurriedly ran over. However, when he saw Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong beside Yu Zimo, he was stunned. He recognized Leng Shiqi. There was a portrait of Leng Shiqi in Dark Lightning Manor's intelligence. Naturally, he knew that Leng Shiqi was the supervisor of Lanqi City. Lu Ziming also knew that his lord had been squeezing Leng Shiqi for a few months to obtain a large amount of resources. Now that the two of them came together, Lu Ziming was worried. Especially when he saw Yu Zimo's gloomy face, he guessed that his lord must have been defeated. Yu Zimo glanced at Lu Ziming and immediately shouted, "What are you waiting for?" Lu Ziming didn't dare to disobey the order. After a slight hesitation, he jogged towards the treasury. Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong silently followed him. When they opened the treasury door, they saw a large amount of resources inside. More than 70 to 80% of them were transported from Leng Shiqi. However, Leng Shiqi felt that it was still too little. In the past few months, the resources that Yu Zimo pulled from him far exceeded what he had now. As for the rest, it must have gone into Duan Chun's pocket. Yu Zimo looked around and ordered, "Move all the resources to Lanqi City." Lu Ziming turned pale with fright when he heard that. All of them? Then what about the monthly salary of the Dark Lightning Guards under them next month? However, he didn't dare to ask in front of the 2 supervisors. He only looked deeply at Leng Shiqi and went to call for his men. Leng Shiqi said in a low voice, "I've said it before. No matter how much resources Yu Zimo took, he would return it with interest." Yu Zimo turned and smiled. "My lord is wise." This Yu Zimo was obviously Thousand Face in disguise. Leng Shiqi was never impulsive. After he came out of seclusion, he began to plan how to get rid of Yu Zimo and take back his resources. Killing Yu Zimo and his 3 subordinates and getting Thousand Face to impersonate Yu Zimo to bring back all the resources here was the first step. Thousand Faces asked, "Your Excellency, what should we do next?" Leng Shiqi and Thousand Faces knew very well that they were able to fool Lu Mingze because as subordinates, they did not dare to spy on their superior's cultivation. That was why Thousand Face dared to pretend to be Yu Zimo, who was in the middle stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. However, this method was useless against Duan Chun, who could see through Thousand Faces' disguise with a single glance. Since that was the case, then don't let Duan Chun and Thousand Face encounter each other. Leng Shiqi said, "Immediately go and pacify the Dark Thunder Guards here. Then claim that you are recuperating in seclusion. I want to go to Duan Chun's place." Leng Shiqi did not give the great supervisor any face and directly mocked him coldly. Duan Chun's face instantly darkened. It had been a long time since someone dared to speak to him like this, and this person was actually his subordinate. And it was a subordinate that he had blackmail on. He immediately shouted angrily, "Lu Xingji, who gave you the guts to speak to me like this? Believe it or not, I can punish you for the crime of disrespect right now." Leng Shiqi shook his head and said, "Duan Chun, you've been the great supervisor for so long, but you're still so stupid and greedy. It's not that I didn't give you any benefits for what I did in Lanqi City, but you went from bad to worse and joined forces with Yu Zimo to take away more than half of my resources. Don't you think about why I dared to do this?" "Humph. Duan Chun sneered proudly and said, "You think I don't know? You once secretly went to find Sir Yu Ruifeng, and you must have given him a lot of benefits to get his acquiescence. But so what? You secretly killed Dark Thunder envoy Gongsun Bing, and more than 20 of his Dark Thunder guards, and I have conclusive evidence here. Once this matter is exposed, even Sir Yu can't protect you." Sigh. Leng Shiqi suddenly sighed again. Duan Chun thought that he had given in, but who knew that Leng Shiqi actually asked him back? "Then why don't you think about it again? Why am I so unyielding and daring to be so presumptuous in front of you?" "Then let me see if you're qualified." After Duan Chun finished speaking, he didn't do anything, but green spiritual energy suddenly burst out from his back. As soon as the spiritual energy appeared, the whole hall was instantly filled with violent spiritual energy. The green spiritual energy condensed into a long spear, roaring and thrusting straight. Duan Chun just wanted to let Leng Shiqi know that Gang Spirit Realm was not someone he could offend. Leng Shiqi was still sitting in the chair. He moved his hands together, and hundreds of silver-gray threads surged out from his hands. Those threads were like small snakes, constantly twisting and entangling the spiritual energy spear. Seeing this, Duan Chun's eyes flashed with a touch of disdain. However, those silver-gray threads did not collapse in an instant as he imagined, but tenaciously blocked the green spiritual spear. And the silver-gray threads also contained a penetrating cold force, which was constantly eroding his spiritual energy. In just 1 or 2 breaths, the spiritual energy spear was worn out. This move was the cold dark thousand silken hands that Leng Shiqi had created by fusing the dark cold dark hands and the silver silk thousand brushing hands. Although the cold thousand threads hands was not very powerful, it was the best weapon for entanglement. In particular, it could restrict the enemy's movement and erode the body with the cold force, hurting the enemy invisibly. Leng Shiqi easily resolved Duan Chun's attack, which made Duan Chun somewhat unable to sit still. Although Duan Chun just made a casual attack, his cultivation was at the 3rd level of Gang Spirit Realm. Apart from other things, Gang Spirit alone was dozens of times stronger than spiritual qi. How could Leng Shiqi take it so easily? Moreover, Leng Shiqi didn't seem to use all his strength. This caused Duan Chun's old face to be put on the spot. He wanted to teach Leng Shiqi a lesson by relying on his high cultivation, but this was the result. Duan Chun's eyes became fierce. He formed a sword with his fingers, and then the torrential cyan sword gang swept over like a rolling river. The whole hall suddenly trembled. This time, Duan Chun didn't hold back at all. He used all his spiritual qi. Leng Shiqi couldn't help but become dignified, but he didn't panic. The devil arrival saber, which was full of pure devil qi, appeared in his hand. Then all the strength of his body gathered on the saber, and even his eyes were covered with dark devil qi. With a buzz, the whole space seemed to be frozen at this moment, and Duan Chun's boundless sword gang became extremely slow. Suddenly, a seemingly invisible saber light flashed away like a flash of the night flower, and this space was actually split into 2 like a broken mirror. All the cyan sword gang disappeared in an instant. Duan Chun's face immediately turned pale with fright, because he could feel that there was an invisible saber light that ignored his physical defense and directly cut into his consciousness. The invisible blade tore his primordial spirit, and the feeling was more painful than being tortured. Duan Chun couldn't help but wail. Duan Chun hurriedly took out a black pill from his mustard seed bag and swallowed it. It was a kind of pill that could nourish the primordial spirit. After swallowing the pill, Duan Chun finally felt much better. Immediately, he looked at Leng Shiqi with a strong sense of fear in his eyes. Leng Shiqi had mastered such a powerful and strange saber technique. When he was in pain just now, if Leng Shiqi continued to attack, it could even threaten his life. Just as Duan Chun was shocked, the whole hall was suddenly divided neatly from the middle into 2 halves and collapsed on both sides. Duan Chun's pupils shrank again. Leng Shiqi didn't attack again because the previous saber attack directly took away 80% of his strength. While Duan Chun was in a daze, he also quietly swallowed a few pills to recover his spiritual power. He secretly sighed that this saber technique consumed too much of his spiritual power. Not only did it empty his spiritual power, but it also consumed most of his mental power, which gave him a headache. However, the power of this saber attack was obvious. This saber attack was created by Lung Shiqi, by combining the ephemeral epiphyllum and the void-slaying saber. It was a spiritual technique that cut the physical body and the primordial spirit. Ephemeral epiphyllum. Chapter 404. Boom. The collapse of the hall immediately attracted a large number of Dark Thunder guards. They gathered quickly, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. However, when they arrived, they didn't find any enemies. What surprised them was that the collapsed hall looked like it had been cut open from the middle by a knife. But they did not feel any knife intent just now. What on earth happened here? Back off! Duan Chun suddenly shouted. Although the crowd did not know why, they still obeyed and retreated. Duan Chun re-examined Lung Shiqi again. The more he looked at him, the more he found that he could not see through Lung Shiqi. His cultivation had soared at such a young age, but he still had such terrifying strength. No wonder he dared to come to him so unyieldingly. It turned out that his greatest reliance was his strength. If Lung Shiqi broke through to the gang spirit realm one day, would Duan Chun be able to defeat him? At this time, a question emerged in Duan Chun's mind. Who on earth was he? Duan Chun also began to doubt Lung Shiqi's identity. Putting everything else aside, just that strange saber move just now was definitely not something that a rogue cultivator could teach. After dismissing the crowd, Duan Chun said calmly, "It turns out that your strength is so strong. The power of this knife is no less than that of the gang spirit realm. You are really a young hero. But you have violated the taboo of the Dark Thunder Guards by attacking me. I can let this matter go, and I can also let bygones be bygones. In the future, you and I will mind our own business. How about that?" Duan Chun's words were tantamount to making a concession. But Lung Shiqi still shook his head. "As I said, I'm still very interested in the position of the great supervisor. Why don't you let me have a seat?" Duan Chun's face became gloomy again. He said in a low voice, "Lu Xingji, you have to know that even Lord Yu can't protect you for the crimes you have committed. And, do you really think I'm afraid of you? Even if I kill you here today, I'm still the great supervisor of North County." Lung Shiqi ignored him after hearing this. Instead, he put away the Devil Advent Warblade and muttered softly, "Judging by the time, it should be about time." When Lung Shiqi said such a strange sentence, Duan Chun was a little stunned. Just as he was puzzled, a Dark Thunder guard hurried over, running and shouting, Sir Li is here. Why are you panicking? Lord Li? Which Lord Li?" The man glanced at Lung Shiqi, then walked to Duan Chun's side and whispered, "It's Lord Yu's right-hand man, Lord Li Hong." Li Hong was here. Duan Chun was shocked. Li Hong was Yu Ruifeng's favorite man, and Yu Ruifeng's adopted son. He also had the cultivation of gang spirit realm. According to rumors, Yu Ruifeng even intended to pass the position of patrol inspector to Li Hong. Therefore, Li Hong was not someone Duan Chun could afford to offend. But why would he suddenly come here? Duan Chun looked at Lung Shiqi suspiciously and decided to welcome Li Hong. Unexpectedly, Li Hong had already come in. Lung Shiqi and Duan Chun turned their heads at the same time. Li Hong's figure was relatively mediocre, but he was a capable and experienced man. He seemed to be in his 30s or 40s. As soon as Li Hong came in, he saw the collapsed hall and couldn't help but show a surprised look. His eyes moved back and forth between the two, and a strange light flashed in his eyes, but he didn't ask anything. He cupped his hands and said, "Sir Duan and Sir Lu are both here. It saves me a lot of trouble." Duan Chun frowned when he heard that. Li Hong actually addressed them as Lord. Although this was a polite form of address, Lung Shiqi, a supervisor, didn't deserve to be addressed this way in front of Li Hong, right? Vaguely, Duan Chun felt that things were not so simple. Then Li Hong took out a black gold scroll and slowly unfolded it. On the back of the scroll, there was a word "dark" printed on it. Duan Chun was surprised when he saw the black gold scroll. And then he bowed and stood up. This was a transfer order that only the supervisor could use, and it was only used when something big happened. Li Hong cleared his throat and said, Supervisor Lu Xingji of Lanqi City has made many outstanding achievements. He is now the supervisor of North County under the Dark Thunder Guards of West Wilderness Prefecture. The former supervisor Duan Chun will be transferred to South County. As soon as Li Hong finished speaking, Duan Chun suddenly turned to look at Leng Shiqi. His eyes were full of surprise, puzzlement, doubt and deep fear. He would never have guessed that Yu Ruifeng would let Leng Shiqi become the supervisor of the North County. The supervisor supervised the entire North County, covering dozens of cities. He had always been guarded by masters of Gang Spirit Realm. Now he let Leng Shiqi, a Gang Spirit Realm master, take over? How could he sit still? However, Duan Chun suddenly remembered that Leng Shiqi became the supervisor when he was in Spiritual Pulse Realm. Not only did he stabilize his position quickly, but he also made huge profits from it. At this moment, he finally understood why Leng Shiqi was so tough and confident. He said again and again that he wanted to be the supervisor. It turned out that he had long known that Yu Ruifeng would appoint him as the supervisor of North County. For Duan Chun, although he was transferred, North County was the foundation of his many years of operation. Even though South County was richer than North County, it was equivalent to creating a lot of trouble for Duan Chun. However, no matter how unwilling he was in his heart, he did not dare to disobey Yu Ruifeng. Duan Chun's eyes flickered, and he asked Li Hong tentatively, Lord Li, I have no objection to the transfer of South County. It's just that I'm used to using some people. Can I take them to South County? Li Hong was a little embarrassed. Then he looked at Leng Shiqi and said, Lord Lu, you can decide. Leng Shiqi did not hesitate and said, You can take them away, but you can't take anything. Duan Chun laughed in his heart when he heard this. He laughed at Leng Shiqi for being short-sighted. He only knew about resources, but did not know the value of talents. Then he snorted coldly with an expressionless face, turned around and left. He thought, I'll transfer all the elites of North County. Let's see how you'll monitor North County. In fact, Leng Shiqi wanted Duan Chun to take away as many people as possible. This way he could arrange more blood-clothing pavilion assassins. After that, the few of them began to hand over their authority. At the same time, Lu Ziming was anxiously pacing around his room in Deer Marshall City. Ever since his lord Yu Zimo returned, he had been avoiding people. There were many things that could not be decided. The other 3 Dark Lightning emissaries had also disappeared. He had sent people to Misty Chi City to investigate, but they did not find anything. All of this was so strange that it was worth thinking about. After hesitating for a while, Lu Ziming resolutely went to the place where the information was transmitted. He wanted to report all his suspicions to the great supervisor, Duan Chun. Although he was acting on his own initiative and overstepping his authority, he had no other choice. However, when he arrived at the sound transmission array, an order came out from it. It was an order that shocked him to the core. Lu Ziming collapsed to the ground. He knew that they were finished. Chapter 405. In Hanzhou City's Dark Thunder Manor, Duan Chun went to the backyard to make preparations, while the Dark Thunder Guards who were peeking nearby were stunned. Their immediate superior was changed just like that? To them, it was like the sky had changed. On the other hand, Leng Shiqi smiled and chatted with Li Hong for a while. Li Hong was quite attentive towards Leng Shiqi. Every time he heard Yu Ruifeng mention Leng Shiqi, be it his expression or tone, he would be full of praise. But Li Hong had never felt jealous. He understood Yu Ruifeng very well. Someone who could make his adoptive father praise him must have some outstanding points. Seeing it today, it was indeed so. Although Li Hong did not see the battle between Leng Shiqi and Duan Chun, it was clear that the two of them had destroyed the discussion hall, while Leng Shiqi, who was at the Spirit Aperture Realm, was not injured at all. This was the embodiment of strength. But because the entire hall had collapsed, the two of them did not even have a place to sit. After exchanging some pleasantries, Li Hong took his leave and went back to report. Leng Shiqi stood in the middle of the ruins and shouted, Men! Several Dark Thunder guards nearby immediately trotted over. They lowered their posture and bowed one by one, saying, "Sir, please give us your orders. Tidy up this place and find a room for me to rest." "Yes, Lord, please follow me." A moment later, Lung Shiqi was brought into a luxurious room. This was the room that Duan Chun used to entertain important guests. Lung Shiqi closed the door and released goo worms nearby before recovering his spirit energy. At the same time, he smiled inwardly. Today's events were all part of his plan. On the day he came out of seclusion, he had asked Qiuqing to send a message to Yu Ruifeng, saying that he had come out of seclusion and could directly send the transfer order to Hanzhou City. Lung Shiqi also knew that the person who came to announce the transfer order was Li Hong. From the western desolated city to Hanzhou City, it would take 3 to 4 days at normal speed. On the other hand, Lung Shiqi made a trip to Marshal Deer City to settle Yu Zimo's matter before returning to Hanzhou City. Judging from the time, he would arrive at Hanzhou City around the same time as Li Hong. To be on the safe side, Lung Shiqi even used his fate skill to check Li Hong's approximate location before entering Dark Thunder Manor to meet Duan Chun. With all these arrangements, Lung Shiqi finally stepped through the gates of Dark Thunder Manor. In addition, there were many reasons why he had a conflict with Duan Chun. Firstly, he wanted Duan Chun to be wary of his strength and even more wary of his potential. After all, Duan Chun did have something on Lung Shiqi. If he really exposed it, even if Yu Ruifeng favored him, he would not be able to avoid punishment. Therefore, he wanted to use this method to make Duan Chun worry, so that he would not dare to expose the matter easily. For Lung Shiqi, the more time passed, the higher his status and strength would be, and the less effective Duan Chun's hold on him would be. Over time, Duan Chun would not be a threat to him. Secondly, Lung Shiqi also wanted to use Duan Chun to test his real strength. He had been in seclusion for 3 months, settling down for a long time, and deducing and integrating many spiritual skills through his spiritual force. Originally, he wanted to try his saber on Yu Zimo, but before he could use his full strength, Yu Zimo died. Therefore, Lung Shiqi turned his attention to Duan Chun. Duan Chun's cultivation was at the 3rd level of Gang Spirit Realm, which was not high among the great supervisors. The reason why he could be the great supervisor was his ability. After all, Dark Thunder Guards was not a military organization, but more inclined to investigation and intelligence. After a fight, Lung Shiqi generally knew that his limit was at the level of Gang Spirit Realm. With the cultivation of the 5th level of Spirit Aperture Realm, his strength was comparable to that of Gang Spirit Realm. As for the 3rd reason why he wanted to fight with Duan Chun, it was to irritate Duan Chun. Now Duan Chun had made up his mind to take away all the elites in Dark Thunder Mansion, leaving Lung Shiqi as a commander without an army. However, he did not know that this was exactly what Lung Shiqi wanted to see. If Duan Chun did not take people away, how could he transfer people from Blood-Clothed Pavilion? Therefore, he could kill 3 birds with 1 stone by fighting with Duan Chun. The news that Lung Shiqi was promoted to the Great Supervisor of North County was immediately transmitted to all the Dark Thunder Mansions in North County through the sound transmission formation. Anyone who got the news was shocked. Of course, for different people, the reaction was different. For example, Lu Ziming knew that he was finished. Yu Zimo had moved a lot of resources from Lung Shiqi in the past few months, which could be said to have offended Lung Shiqi. But who would have thought that Lung Shiqi would become the great supervisor of North County in the blink of an eye? As the saying goes, those with a higher rank can crush people to death. There was no need to think too much. Soon their dear Marshal City's Dark Thunder Manor would definitely face a great purge. The few people in Miss Chi City did not have much of a reaction when they received the news, because they already knew about it when Qiuqing sent the news. However, they were also looking forward to it because Lung Shiqi's promotion meant that the position of the supervisor of Miss Chi City would be vacant. Perhaps it would fall on their heads. In North County, there were a total of 6 Dark Thunder Mansions. Other than Hanzhou City, there were a total of 5 supervisors scattered around. Other than Miss Chi City and Dear Marshal City, the other 3 supervisors were shocked when they received the news. They had obviously heard of the name Lu Xingji, which was why they found it hard to believe. In fact, it had only been half a year since Leng Shiqi entered the Dark Thunder Guards. In half a year, he had directly become the great supervisor. Not to mention that no one would be able to achieve this kind of promotion speed in the future. It was definitely unprecedented. The three of them tried their best to gather information about Leng Shiqi, and found out that Leng Shiqi seemed to have fought with Duan Chun and destroyed the meeting hall. In the end, the two of them seemed to be evenly matched. A spirit aperture realm cultivator and a spirit astral realm cultivator were evenly matched. They also began to wonder about Leng Shiqi's background and strength. In addition, Leng Shiqi's position as the great supervisor was personally conferred by Yu Ruifeng, which meant that Leng Shiqi was highly regarded by Yu Ruifeng. The three of them did not dare to have any other thoughts and planned to go to Hanzhou City to meet the new great supervisor. At the same time, Leng Shiqi also sent a message to Qiucheng and Yuzimo, asking them to come to Hanzhou City. In Miss Qi City's Dark Thunder Mansion, Qin Jianchen, Guan Feihong, Qiucheng and Xiao Qian arranged everything and set off together. Only Qin Jianchen and Guan Feihong knew that they might not have the chance to come to Miss Qi City in the future. In Dear Marshall City's Dark Thunder Mansion, Yuzimo, who had been recuperating for a few days, also came out and found Lu Ziming immediately. When he learned that Leng Shiqi had been promoted to the great supervisor, he pretended to be shocked and then rushed to Hanzhou City with Lu Ziming with a serious expression. Chapter 406. 3 days later, a brand new meeting hall was built in Hanzhou City's Dark Thunder Manor. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was sitting high up, and there were 4 people sitting in front of him. Apart from Yuzimo, the other 3 were Pure Loyalty City's supervisor, Shen Yuanda, who was a rather old man. There was also Huijiang City's supervisor, Ruan Hongguang, who was a man dressed in martial attire. There was also Longyi City's supervisor, Jin Yuan, who was a young man with a smile. As for the Lanqi City's supervisor position, there was no one here. After the few of them exchanged greetings for a while, the atmosphere in the entire assembly hall became more and more solemn. Shin Yuenda and the other 2 all looked at Yuzimo. They had also inquired about what Yuzimo had done some time ago. They all sneered in their hearts, thinking that Yuzimo really didn't know what was good for him. Today Leng Shiqi called them over, not only to meet and explain the new rules, but also to use Yuzimo to establish his power. Sure enough, Leng Shiqi quickly made things difficult for Yuzimo. He said coldly, "Yuzimo, I can let bygones be bygones for what you have done in the past, but you should show some sincerity." Yuzimo's face suddenly sank, and he stammered, "Sir, previously in Dear Marshall City, this humble one has already handed over all the resources in the treasury. However, this humble one is willing to contribute all the resources collected in the future to Sir, and swear to be loyal to Sir forever." Not enough. Leng Shiqi said these 2 words with an expressionless face. Yuzimo took a deep breath, and a dagger suddenly appeared in his hand, and he ruthlessly stabbed it into his shoulder. He didn't use any spiritual energy to block it, nor did he suppress the wound, and blood flowed out freely. The bright red color immediately made the other 3 feel that it was very dazzling, and at the same time, they all felt a chill run down their backs. However, Leng Shiqi still said, "Not enough." Yuzimo raised his hand, and his eyes stared straight at Leng Shiqi, and he said in a deep voice, "Could it be that this humble one has to commit suicide here for Sir to be satisfied? That sounds like a good idea." Yuzimo couldn't bear it any longer, and revealed a look of anger. The 3 inspectors beside him did not even dare to breathe loudly. It was obvious that Leng Shiqi was using Yuzimo to establish his authority. Leng Shiqi's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He raised one hand to the sky, and a dazzling golden light condensed into a small sun. As the blazing sun appeared in the sky, waves of sharp golden energy assaulted their faces, causing them to activate their protective spiritual armors one after another. Then the golden sun suddenly changed, and a layer of green flames ignited on it. Those were not ordinary flames but poisonous flames. After the 6-yang poisonous fire palm merged with the glorious sun mysterious sun palm, it became the glorious sun poisonous sun palm. Leng Shiqi shot out a palm, and the poisonous flame blazing sun rushed towards Yuzimo. Yuzimo knew something was wrong the moment Lung Shiqi made his move. He turned around and started to run, but how could he run? In the blink of an eye, Yuzimo's body was completely submerged by the poisonous flame-blazing sun, and a thunderous roar resounded in the meeting hall. A strong poisonous flame raged, and a tyrannical power erupted. A part of the meeting hall that had just been built collapsed in an instant. When all the power dissipated, where was Yuzimo's figure? He had been directly turned into ashes by this move. Xin Yuanda, Ruan Hongguang, and Jin Yuan all had their mouths wide open, and their eyes were filled with horror. No matter what, Yuzimo's cultivation was at the spirit aperture realm, and he had been killed by Lung Shiqi in a single move. Moreover, even if Yuzimo had offended Lung Shiqi, he was still an inspector. How could Lung Shiqi dare to kill an inspector in public? Originally, they had only thought that Lung Shiqi would use Yuzimo to beat them up, and Yuzimo would at most be reprimanded and given some benefits. However, they had never thought that Lung Shiqi would kill Yuzimo in front of them. At this moment, they had experienced Lung Shiqi's terrifying strength and iron fist. They also understood that today, Lung Shiqi did not want to use Yuzimo to beat them up, but to use Yuzimo's blood as an example to others. Xin Yuanda was the first to react. He bowed deeply and said, "Your Excellency's strength is unprecedented. This humble one admires you." The other two immediately complimented him. Lung Shiqi clapped his hands and revealed a harmless smile. He casually motioned for everyone to sit down, as if the one who had just killed someone was not him at all. After the four of them sat down, Lung Shiqi said with a smile, "The three of you are all senior inspectors of the North County. I am the newly appointed inspector, and I still need your support. Your Excellency is too polite. We will definitely follow your lead." "Yes, Your Excellency, please feel free to instruct this humble one in the future. It is this humble one's honor to be able to serve Your Excellency." The three of them nodded like they were pounding garlic and spoke eagerly. "Since all of you have said so, this envoy really does have a troublesome matter." Lung Shiqi frowned and said, "You should also know that after the previous great inspector Duan Chun left, he took away most of the elites of Dark Thunder Manor. I am currently short of manpower here." Xin Yuanda immediately said, "Your Excellency, please rest assured. When this humble one returns, I will personally select 30 elite Dark Thunder guards and a Dark Thunder envoy for Your Excellency." This number was equivalent to 1/3 of his subordinates, and he said it so easily. Of course, Ruan Hongguang and Jin Yuan were not willing to fall behind. They also expressed that they would send a large number of elites over. Lung Shiqi nodded in satisfaction and said, "You can rest assured that after a while, this envoy will also recruit some people for you. I will not let you suffer a loss." Xin Yuanda and the other two looked at each other. At this moment, they understood that Lung Shiqi did not really want to borrow their people. Instead, he wanted to place Lung Shiqi's own people in their subordinates. However, even if they knew, they did not dare to have any intention of disobeying. After all, Yuzimo's bloodstains were still in front of them. They did not want to follow in Yuzimo's footsteps. Since Lung Shiqi's goal was achieved, they politely said a few words and sent the three people away. After the three people left, a figure suddenly appeared in the hall. It was Thousand Face. The Yuzimo that Lung Shiqi killed was naturally Thousand Face in disguise. Before the solar poisonous Yang Palm fell, he used the Hand of Earth to lure Thousand Face into the ground. However, under the cover of the dazzling light of the solar poisonous Yang Palm, Xin Yuanda and the other two did not notice. Lung Shiqi asked Thousand Face to call Qin Jianchen and the others over and arrange a series of things. Chapter 407. In the following period of time, the Dark Thunder Guards in the North region underwent a huge change in personnel. Firstly, all the Dark Thunder envoys in the Mist Qi City's Dark Thunder Manor were transferred to Hanzhou City. These people were used to Lung Shiqi, so they were all transferred over. As for the Mist Qi City, he directly transferred a silver-striped blood-clothed assassin and 4 black-striped blood-clothed assassins from the Bloodcloth Pavilion to oversee the city. From then on, the Mist Qi City's Dark Thunder Manor had completely become a small branch of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. The Dear Marshal City's Dark Thunder Manor was about the same. The high-level supervisors and Dark Thunder envoys were all replaced by assassins from the Bloodcloth Pavilion. As for the Dark Thunder Guards, a portion of them were transferred to Hanzhou City. At the same time, Leng Shiqi also arranged for dozens of black-clothed assassins to enter Dear Marshal City. As for the remaining 3 Dark Thunder Manors, just as Leng Shiqi had previously instructed, Leng Shiqi had arranged for some black-clothed assassins and 1 black-striped blood-clothed assassin to monitor Shen Yuanda, and the other 2 at all times. Very quickly, the entire North region was in the hands of Leng Shiqi. With his Spirit Aperture realm cultivation, no one dared to question or provoke him when he took the position of the head supervisor. This was because there were only 2 groups of people who dared to provoke him. One of them was the seniors in Hanzhou City's Dark Thunder Manor, but almost all of them were taken away by Duan Chun. The remaining few were quite old and had no other advantages other than experience, so they naturally couldn't cause any trouble. The other group was Shen Yuanda, and the other 2. However, these 3 people were directly frightened by Leng Shiqi. Therefore, he easily stabilized his position, and it was even easier than when he took the position of head supervisor. Moreover, he also instructed Dear Marshal City and the surrounding cities to openly smuggle goods, and the rules were the same as Mischi cities. As a result, the resources Leng Shiqi could obtain every month instantly doubled. Moreover, as time passed, this city would definitely attract more and more merchants, and his harvest would only increase. What Leng Shiqi needed to do next was to integrate the assassins he arranged into the Dark Thunder Guards as soon as possible. At the very least, the Dark Thunder Hall could operate normally. Therefore, Leng Shiqi was also very busy these days. He had never been good at these things, but now that he was appointed as the great supervisor, he couldn't be as relaxed as before. At the very least, he would have to wait for his subordinates to completely take over a few Dark Thunder Manors before he could do so. That night, after Leng Shiqi finished reviewing all the missions and information, he closed his eyes and took a nap. He had never liked to do such things, but he was exhausted these past few days. It was even more tiring than non-stop cultivation. However, at this moment, Leng Shiqi, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly pointed his finger. In an instant, the blood qi and the power of lightning transformed into a blood-red thunderbolt that shot out towards an empty space in the room. However, the blood-red bolt of lightning suddenly turned invisible and disappeared halfway through its flight. At the same time, a figure walked out of the void. It was Wu Xiang. Wu Xiang appeared and stared at Leng Shiqi with a burning gaze. He secretly praised, "Tisk tsk, my good disciple. Is this how you welcome your master?" Leng Shiqi didn't expect Wu Xiang to suddenly appear here. Just now, he inadvertently sensed that there was a weak aura hidden nearby, so he took action to test it out. Disciple greets master. Leng Shiqi stood up and cupped his fist. Wu Xiang raised his hand and formed an isolation restriction. He praised, "I've heard about what you did in the Dark Thunder Guards. I didn't expect you to be promoted to the Great Supervisor in just half a year. Your cultivation has also improved by leaps and bounds. As expected, a great teacher produces a great disciple." Leng Shiqi heard this and the corner of his eyes twitched. However, he still said, "It's all because of Master's good teaching." "Hee, that's enough. I was just saying it casually. Your cultivation has improved so quickly. It seems that you have had a lot of opportunities. You are really lucky." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi didn't think so. Instead, he felt that he was too good at causing trouble. No matter where he went, he would inexplicably encounter great danger. Just like this time in Zhulu country, if he didn't have several trump cards, he would have died long ago. How could he have the glory he had today? Therefore, opportunities and dangers coexisted. Some people could turn dangers into opportunities, while others would be buried even if they were given a great opportunity. However, Leng Shiqi didn't know why Wu Xiang suddenly appeared here. He asked, "Master, why did you come all the way from Muqin County to the West Desolate Province?" "Sai, it's all because of you." Wu Xiang sighed deeply and said, "After you became the great supervisor, almost half of the assassins in the West Desolate Province were transferred away by you. The West Desolate Province is remote, and there aren't many assassins there. With so many people transferred away, the West Desolate Province is almost unable to operate. I brought a group of assassins from the main pavilion to replenish the number of people in the West Desolate Province, so I came to see you. Hearing this answer, Lung Shiqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When he went to the West Desolate Province to use the silver-striped blood kill order to transfer people, the main pavilion here agreed very quickly, so Lung Shiqi didn't care too much. It turned out that the other party's heart was bleeding. Wu Xiang continued. Of course, Master also has a few things to tell you. First of all, with your cultivation, you could have been promoted to a silver-striped blood-clothed assassin, but you haven't done a mission for a long time, so the blood drops are definitely not enough. The sect took into account your uniqueness, and let many of our people infiltrate the Dark Thunder Guards, which is not a small contribution, so the sect decided to directly promote you to a silver-striped blood-clothed assassin. Lung Shiqi was stunned for a moment. He actually almost forgot about this. The main thing was that he hadn't done an assassin mission for too long, so he almost forgot that it was his job. Then Wu Xiang took out a bag and handed it over. Lung Shiqi opened it and saw his new clothes, identity token, and 2 jade slips. Wu Xiang explained, "You are a newly promoted silver-striped blood-clothed assassin, so according to the rules, you can obtain a level 5 spirit technique for free. It's not convenient for you to go to the main pavilion to choose, so I directly chose one for you. It's more suitable for the 7 Fiend Blood Kill art. As for the other jade slip, it's the complete 7 Fiend Blood Kill art. The complete 7 Fiend Blood Kill art. And the spirit technique that was compatible with it. The 7 Fiend Blood Kill art that Lung Shiqi cultivated before was given to him by Senior Sister Sulwan. And it was only the first part. After he broke through to the Spirit Aperture realm, there was no other cultivation method, so of course he was happy to accept it. At this time, Lung Shiqi suddenly asked, "Master, I want to ask you about someone." Wu Xiang laughed sinisterly and said, "Kid, even if you don't say it, I know who it is. It's Delta Origi." Chapter 408. As for Delta Origi, Lung Shiqi really wanted to know her whereabouts. Since the Blood Cloak Pavilion's Blood Seed plan had been launched, Delta Origi must have been arranged to join a big force. He was both concerned and curious. However, Wu Xiang fell silent. Lung Shiqi's heart suddenly tightened. Could it be that something had happened to Delta Origi? "Master, what happened to Delta Origi?" he asked anxiously. "She went to the Blood Prison." Wu Xiang's voice was a little low. Blood Prison? Lung Shiqi had never heard of this place, but just by hearing the name, he knew it was not a good place. Wu Xiang explained, "There are 2 kinds of people in the Blood Prison. One is the abandoned disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. These people basically violated the rules of the sect, and were sent to the Blood Prison. If there are no accidents, they will be trapped there for the rest of their lives. As for the other kind, it has something to do with you and Gu-san." Lung Shiqi could not help but be a little surprised when he heard this. Before the establishment of the Blood Fog Island, the biggest difficulty the sect encountered was the lack of a large number of talents. As you know, the Blood Cloak Pavilion is an assassin force. Whether it is the system of training assassins or the strength of their assassins, they are the best in the world. However, there are almost no people in the Blood Cloak Pavilion who study formations, alchemy, weapon refining, and the like. In order to establish the Blood Fog Island, a large number of formation masters, beast tamers, puppet masters, and so on are needed. The Blood Cloak Pavilion does not have any of these people. Therefore, the sect decided to use the method of escaping, secretly keeping those who needed to be killed in the mission, and sending them to the Blood Fog Island to maintain the normal operation of the Blood Fog Island. After you came out of the Blood Fog Island, these people were supposed to be dealt with, but they were indeed very capable. The sect also felt that it was a pity to kill them directly, so they were all imprisoned in the Blood Prison. The more he listened, the more Lung Shiqi frowned. From what Wu Xiang said, the people in the Blood Prison could be said to be all vicious outlaws. Why did Delta Origi go to the Blood Prison? Could it be that she had made a huge mistake? At this time Wu Xiang said, Delta Orgi wanted to go in. What? Lung Shiqi was suddenly surprised. His mind raced, but he couldn't figure out why Delta Orgi would take the initiative to enter the blood prison. Wu Xiang looked at Lung Shiqi with a strange look. Speaking of which, this has something to do with you. Because the Delta Orgi felt that their strength was far inferior to yours and wanted to catch up to you or even surpass you. They chose to enter the blood prison. Master will not hide it from you. The living environment in the blood prison is far worse than you can imagine. Compared to the blood prison, the Blood Mist Island you're on is simply an immortal palace. However, you don't have to worry. The sect naturally won't let anything happen to Delta Orgi. There are also people secretly protecting her in the blood prison. And from what I know, Delta Orgi seems to have already broken through to the spirit aperture realm. It seems that her decision to go to the blood prison was the correct one. Hearing that Delta Orgi had also broken through to the spirit aperture realm, Lung Shiqi was inwardly shocked. He remembered that Delta Orgi had only broken through to the spirit aperture realm for less than a year, but she had actually directly crossed an entire realm. Delta Orgi's cultivation talent could be said to be terrifying. She had also received the teachings of the Sky Origin Realm expert, Bone Demon, and had also trained in the blood prison, so it was natural for her to have such a cultivation. Seeing that Lung Shiqi seemed to understand, Wu Xiang changed the topic. You've been promoted very quickly in the Western Desolate Province, but from now on, don't be greedy and advance rashly. You need to know how to restrain yourself. Although the Western Desolate Province is under Yu Ruifeng's jurisdiction, there are still others watching you. If you promote too quickly and too loudly, it will inevitably attract the attention of others. Your identity can be said to be perfect, but Master's identity still has loopholes. If someone finds out, all our previous efforts will be wasted. Lung Shiqi nodded. He had originally planned to stabilize for a period of time. Since Wu Xiang had nothing else to tell him, he might as well quietly leave. Lung Shiqi began to study the complete 7 Fiend Blood Art, as well as the new rank 5 spiritual skill 7 Fiend Blood Art. First, he used the system to learn the 7 Fiend Blood Art. The biggest characteristic of the 7 Fiend Blood Art was that it could mobilize one's own blood chi and killing intent. Blood Carnage was a spiritual skill that used blood chi. Now that he was at the spirit aperture realm, he could cultivate a deeper level of killing intent. The spiritual skill that controlled killing intent was called Imperial Fiend Art. This spiritual skill did not have a specific rank, because the power of the Imperial Fiend Art was directly related to the density of the user's killing intent. After Lung Shiqi finished cultivating the Imperial Fiend Art, he formed a seal with both hands. He planned to stimulate the invisible killing intent in his body to see how high his killing intent was. Lung Shiqi's seal did not move. Immediately, a trace of blood chi emerged from his body. Immediately after, his body seemed to have opened a floodgate as waves of killing intent appeared crazily. Not long after, the entire room was filled with a dense killing intent. One could even faintly hear the wailing of ghosts. Even Lung Shiqi's eyes were faintly red as a tyrannical emotion rose up. At this moment, Lung Shiqi's spiritual illusion world shook slightly. A ripple filled with a strange rhythm surged out and suppressed the emotions. He looked to his left and right, and was a little surprised at how thick his murderous aura was. Normally, people who had this much killing intent would have already become madmen who only knew how to kill. The reason why Lung Shiqi did not have any abnormalities was because his willpower was very firm and his mentality was very good. Perhaps it was a habit formed from the Blood Fog Island, but the people he killed were people who deserved to be killed. Therefore, he did not have any worries in his heart. Moreover, his mental strength was very strong and was enough to suppress the killing intent. Next, Lung Shiqi followed the method in the Imperial Fiend Art to first tame the killing intent and completely absorb it for his own use. In this way, he could avoid being affected by the killing intent and also use it to defend against enemies. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The spirit seal in Lung Shiqi's hand changed, and the dense baleful aura quickly gathered and slowly circulated around him. As time passed, the killing intent condensed into a layer of dark red light film that attached to Lung Shiqi's body. Gradually, the shape of this layer of light film began to change. After 2 hours, it actually transformed into a thin light armor. This was one of the methods of using killing intent in the Imperial Fiend art, the Blood Fiend Spirit Armor. Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators were able to use their spirit energy to condense a protective spirit armor around their body. The protective spirit armor was far stronger than the protective spirit energy. Normal Spirit Pulse realm attacks would find it difficult to break through the protective spirit armor. The defensive power of the Blood Fiend Spirit Armor was far stronger than the protective spirit armor. At the same time, the killing intent released by the armor could affect the opponent's mind. This was a high-level spirit technique that combined both defense and disruption. In addition, the Imperial Fiend art also had an offensive spirit technique called Heart Calamity. Chapter 409. Evil Heart Retribution was a method that could inject evil chi into the enemy's body. The evil chi would erode the enemy's body and destroy the enemy's consciousness. It could be said that it was an extremely vicious spiritual technique. Lung Shiqi directly used his infinite skill points to upgrade these two spiritual techniques to the Great Perfection realm. The Blood Evil Spirit Armor became more solid and heavy. Unfortunately, he couldn't test the power of the Evil Heart Retribution. After cultivating these two spiritual techniques, Lung Shiqi picked up another Jade Slip. This was the level 5 spiritual technique that Wu Xiang had chosen for him. The 7 Swords of Bloody Massacre. This sword technique was of the same origin as the 7 Swords of Bloody Massacre. The two complemented each other, but it wasn't recorded in the cultivation technique. This was because the Blood Garment Pavilion had never restricted the cultivation direction of their disciples. The Blood Slaughter 7 Fiend art itself had the Blood Slaughter art and the Fiend Resistance art, which were both auxiliary spirit skills. In this way, the Blood Cloak assassins could choose the path that was most suitable for them based on their talents and preferences. If you used a sword, you could also exchange your blood for the 7 Swords of Bloody Massacre. Lung Shiqi picked up the Jade Slip and used his mental power to explore it. He saw the cultivation technique of the 7 Swords of Bloody Massacre. At the same time, the system gave him a prompt. Without saying anything, he cultivated it to the Great Perfection realm in one step. The 7 Swords of Bloody Massacre had a total of 7 sword moves. Each move was stronger than the previous one. When cultivated to the Great Perfection realm, the 7 moves could be combined into one move. When the sword was used, it seemed like only one move, but in fact there were 7 sword moves hidden. Not only was the explosive power extremely strong, but it was also impossible to guard against. For Lung Shiqi, with his current cultivation, the previous 17 sword techniques of Mount Song was somewhat useless. Therefore, the Bloody Slaughter 7 deadly swords could be considered as a supplement for him. With Wu Xiang's visit, he gave Lung Shiqi a cultivation method and a spiritual skill, which allowed Lung Shiqi's strength to increase again. When Lung Shiqi finished studying the cultivation techniques and spiritual techniques, the sky was already bright. He pondered for a moment and sent someone to call Qiucheng over. When Qiucheng learned that Lung Shiqi was looking for him early in the morning, he knew that there must be something urgent. He hurried to Lung Shiqi's room and bowed. "Greetings, Darren." After Lung Shiqi transferred Qiucheng to Hanzhou City, although he was still a Dark Lightning envoy, the authority in his hands was far greater than before. He also knew that all of this was given to him by Lung Shiqi, so he was even more respectful towards Lung Shiqi. "Qiucheng, let me ask you," Lung Shiqi asked straightforwardly. "Are there any powerful alchemists in the northern county? At the very least, it has to be the kind that can refine Tier 6 medicinal pills." The reason why Lung Shiqi asked this was because he didn't lack any cultivation methods or spiritual skills, and he was almost done with the fusion of the spiritual skills. Thus he began to shift his focus to improving his cultivation. However, for a spirit cultivator of the Spirit Aperture realm, increasing his cultivation was becoming more and more difficult. If he only relied on bitter cultivation, he didn't know when he would be able to cultivate to the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture realm. Although Lung Shiqi had the Yin-Yang Spirit Convergence Array, this array consumed too many spirit stones. In the 3 months that he was in seclusion, he had already used up 70 to 80% of the spirit stones he obtained from the Gu God sect. Even if his family was rich, it couldn't support him to use the yin-yang spirit convergence array without limit. Thus, Leng Shiqi thought of the most suitable pill for a spirit aperture realm cultivator, the awakening pill. Not only could the awakening pill help a spirit cultivator open their spirit aperture, it could also greatly increase their cultivation. And Leng Shiqi himself had something very precious, and that was the awakening pill's recipe. This recipe was obtained in the illusory spirit secret realm, and he had never used it. Now it was time for it to be used. The awakening pill was a tier 6 medicinal pill, and the awakening pill's recipe was enough to be ranked as a tier 8 treasure. The value of the awakening pill and its recipe was the same as the value of eggs and hens. One was a one-time consumable, and the other was something that could be continuously produced. The value was completely incomparable. However, Leng Shiqi didn't know how to refine pills, so he could only recruit an alchemist who could refine the awakening pill. As for the materials, he had prepared most of them. First of all, he had taken a lot of materials to refine the awakening pill when he was in the Gu God sect. Coupled with the inventory of the various Dark Thunder Hall, he didn't have to worry about the materials for a short period of time. Now it could be said that everything was ready, and he only lacked an alchemist. Thus he called Qiu Cheng over to ask. Qiu Cheng's eyes were moving around, and he was carefully searching his memories. People who could refine tier 6 medicinal pills were enough to be called alchemist masters. Such people were very rare, and after thinking for a while he finally thought of one person. Sir, there is indeed an alchemist master in the north region called Wenren Gu. Qiu Cheng replied. However, this person is not from a spirit cultivator sect. He has been wandering around for many years, so I don't know where he is now. I don't even know if he is in the north region. As long as there is someone, Leng Shiqi ordered, spread out all the information to find Wenren Gu. Once you find him, immediately invite him over. Yes. Qiu Cheng did not hesitate to turn around and carry out the task. After Qiu Cheng left, Leng Shiqi sent someone to call Guan Feihong. After Guan Feihong walked in, he cupped his hands and took out a piece of paper. Then he stood with his hands behind his back. Leng Shiqi immediately frowned. During this period of time, he had asked Guan Feihong to search for information about the Dark Shadow clan. But the result was a piece of paper? One must know that Guan Feihong was able to mobilize the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the Dark Thunder Guard's information network at the same time. How could he only find out such little information? However, Leng Shiqi did not mean to blame him. He believed that Guan Feihong would not neglect his duties. Since he had upgraded the system, he knew that he had a bloodline called the Dark Shadow Clan. However, he was very unfamiliar with this name, so he asked Guan Feihong to search for information about it. When Leng Shiqi picked up the piece of paper, there was only one line on it. The Dark Shadow Clan seems to be related to the Nether Temple. The Nether Temple. Leng Shiqi murmured these words. At this time, Guan Feihong took out another piece of information, which recorded the information about the Nether Temple. Similarly, this piece of information only had a few sentences. The Nether Temple is a transcendent force that is above the 3 dynasties. It is one of the Yin and Yang temples. Guan Feihong explained in a timely manner. The Nether Temple is extremely secretive. Until now, no one knows where their sect is. According to the information for thousands of years, the Nether Temple has only appeared a few times on the continent. However, every time they appear, they will display shocking strength. The last time they appeared was more than 10 years ago. At that time, a first-rate force was single-handedly slaughtered by a person from the Nether Temple. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi frowned deeply. Chapter 410. Leng Shiqi just wanted to inquire about his bloodline, but he didn't expect that the Nether Temple would be involved. According to Guan Feihong, a person who could destroy a first-class force by himself must be an expert of the Tianyuan realm. And the Nether Temple was even more powerful than the 3 dynasties. It could be imagined how terrible this force was. The system did show that Leng Shiqi had the bloodline, but he didn't feel it at all. He also remembered that before he broke through to the spirit aperture realm on the Goo God Peak, a mysterious black mark appeared on his forehead, which helped him absorb a lot of power. But since then, Lung Shiqi had checked his body countless times, but he didn't find any trace. Now he knew that the Dark Shadow Clan had an inseparable relationship with the Nether Temple, and he had no way to deal with it for a while. Of course, the real awakening of the bloodline would definitely make his strength improve greatly, but Lung Shiqi didn't want to provoke such a giant like the Nether Temple for no reason. So he had to put the bloodline matter aside for the time being. Well, thank you for your hard work, Lung Shiqi said to Guan Feihong. It's my duty. Guan Feihong changed the topic and said, by the way, Your Excellency, I just got the news this morning that the second-class force, Wind and Thunder Tower, invited you to participate in their monster slaughtering assembly. Wind and Thunder Tower? Monster slaughtering assembly? He had heard of the Wind and Thunder Tower. It was one of the few second-class forces in the North County, famous for the power of wind and thunder. But why would the Wind and Thunder Tower hold a monster slaughtering assembly? This was the West Wilderness County, where there wasn't even a demonic beast. How could there be a monster to slaughter? What Lung Shiqi cared more about was that when he heard the word monster, he immediately thought of Jiuli. It had been half a year since he parted with Jiuli last time. During this time, he hadn't received any message from Jiuli, let alone know where she had gone. But Lung Shiqi knew that Jiuli wouldn't stay put. Last time in the Donglin County, Jiuli sneaked into the Extreme Fire Manor and took most of their resources. Later, she was chased by 2 gang Spirit Realm disciples, which was miserable. This time, could he have offended the Wind Thunder Tower again? This was not Lung Shiqi's imagination running wild. Rather, if there was a powerful demonic beast in the Western Desolate Province, it could only be 9 Leave. Of course, Lung Shiqi also hoped that he was just imagining things. Guan Feihong saw that Lung Shiqi didn't say anything, so he asked, Darren, this subordinate has rejected them. No. Lung Shiqi said. Tell me what happened first. It's like this. Guan Feihong answered. Some time ago, the Wind Thunder Tower captured a demonic beast. It was said that this beast had committed heinous crimes in the East County and was chased all the way to the North County. In the end, it fell into the hands of the Wind Thunder Tower. Thus, the Wind and Thunder Tower wanted to hold a demonic extermination assembly to kill this demonic beast in front of everyone to prove the might of the heavens. Lung Shiqi sneered. What did he mean by proving the might of the heavens? He just wanted to use this opportunity to improve his reputation. These spiritual cultivation sects cared about these things most. However, after listening to Guan Feihong's words, Lung Shiqi felt that the demonic beast was more likely to be 9 Leave. He had to go and take a look. He said, prepare some gifts and follow me to the Wind Thunder Tower. The Wind Thunder Tower was located in the east of the North County, which was very close to the East County. On this day, Lung Shiqi took Guan Feihong to the Wind Thunder Tower. Both of them were wearing the clothes of the Dark Thunder Guard, so they were soon recognized by the doorman at the door. Guan Feihong handed over the name card. The doorman immediately stared at them and looked up at Lung Shiqi. Then he shouted, the supervisor of the North County of the Dark Thunder Guard, Darren Liu, is here. Soon, a gray-haired old man in a purple cloak came out with a warm smile. This man was the head of the Wind Thunder Tower, Hong Guangji. He was at the late stage of the Spirit Gang realm. Even so, Hong Guangji had to be polite to Lung Shiqi, who was at the middle stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. That was because of Lung Shiqi's identity. Although the Discipline Department was said to be a deterrent to the Spirit Cultivator sects, the Discipline Department was equivalent to a tiger blocking the road. If you couldn't beat it, you could go around it. The Dark Thunder Guard was equivalent to a poisonous snake hiding in the dark, staring at you all the time. Once you showed the slightest flaw, you would die without a burial place. Therefore, for these Spirit Cultivator sects, sometimes the Dark Thunder Guard was more threatening than the Discipline Department. Darren Liu is here. It's an honor, an honor. Hong Guangji laughed. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling person. Lung Shiqi also laughed and said, Head Hong, it's an honor to meet you. Ha ha ha, Darren Liu, please come in. Please. Hong Guangji led Leng Shiqi and Guan Feihong into the Wind Thunder Tower. The buildings in the Wind Thunder Tower were mainly small pavilions, each of which was very unique. At this time, there were many people talking to each other in the pavilions. These were all people who came to participate in the demon slaughtering assembly. When they saw Leng Shiqi coming, they all looked at him. The topic of these people's conversation naturally turned to Leng Shiqi, the new supervisor of the North County. Of course, there were good and bad comments. Some envied him for reaching such a high position at such a young age, and some didn't think he could do well in this position. Leng Shiqi turned a deaf ear to those people's discussion. What he cared about most was who was going to be slaughtered in this so-called demon slaughtering assembly. He lowered his voice and asked, "Head Hong, to tell you the truth, I have been very curious about what this demon beast looks like. You also know that many people in the West Wilderness Prefecture have never seen a demon beast in their lives. Can you let me see it first?" This, Hong Guangji revealed a hesitant expression. Logically speaking, he naturally hoped to wait until everyone was here before revealing the true appearance of the demon beast. However, Leng Shiqi's status was not low. If he did not even agree to such a small request, it would be a bit disrespectful. "Of course, there's no problem. I'll bring Lord Lu over to take a look." Just as they were about to move, the doorman's shout came again. "The Grand Commissioner of the North County's Discipline Division, Lord Wang, has arrived. The people from the Discipline Division are here too?" Hearing this, Leng Shiqi was a little puzzled. The relationship between the Discipline Division and the Spirit Cultivators sect had never been good. In the hearts of the Spirit Cultivators, the Discipline Division was the lackey of the Imperial Court and was not liked. Moreover, the Discipline Division had to maintain a certain distance from the Spirit Cultivator sect. If they got close, it would not be good for either side. Not only was Leng Shiqi puzzled, even Hong Guangji was puzzled, and revealed a surprised expression. Because he did not invite the Discipline Division at all. Now that the people from the Discipline Division had come uninvited, the Grand Commissioner had personally come. That was in existence on the same level as the Dark Thunder Guard's supervisor. Hong Guangji's heart could not help but beat faster. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.